This is Hunter Muse.
And this is Chris Snipes, and you are listening
to The Melt.
Hello, you fine people. Thank you so much for listening. It's great getting back into the swing of doing the melt again, at least for this summer. I don't know if I will realistically be able to carry it on throughout the school year. I certainly would love to, but it's so work intensive. So, yeah, the summer, we're just recording a cluster of interviews and then distributing them throughout the weeks afterwards. So this will happen probably maybe 3 months, or this will be released 3 months after we conducted the interview. Because Derrick was actually the first interview that we did for this batch of episodes. But as it is, he came out the third in line. Um, but I feel like, and I know this has been brought up so many places, but I remember it wasn't too long ago before I had never heard of the Derrick Jensen clip, the Queer Theory Jeopardy um, clip of his, which there was a whole story behind it. And I believe he alludes to a little bit of it in our conversation, which completely never had a whole lot of focus. It kind of jumped all over the place, but it was interesting. It was compelling nonetheless. We didn't really talk a whole lot about queer theory and the stuff that he mentions um, in this little episode here that happens in a public library after he got canceled from the original place that he was supposed to speak. So a bunch of people turned out to sort of shout him down, and he came prepared with Queer Theory Jeopardy, a spontaneous game that he started playing with the crowd. Quite amusing, but sorry to play it here again, but I'm sure there are going to be those of you who have not either heard of this uh, or have heard of it but haven't actually heard it. So hopefully it will be a treat for both of you. Otherwise, everybody else can fast forward the 23 minutes or whatever. Um, yeah. So enjoy, and then enjoy the convo with Derrick.
But the problem with Diogenes, or one of the problems with Diogenes, was that the oracle at Delphi had told him that his job in life was to deface cultural currency. And what that meant is that he was supposed to violate social norms. And so this manifested in him defecating in the theater. Remember, I read the thing about how from the beginning anarchism has had this problem. So he would defecate in the theater because no one's going to tell me where I can and can't defecate. He would masturbate in the public market, which the whole public sex thing that's pushed by anarchism goes all the way back to that as well. And he would violate all social norms. And so here's the problem, is that, or one of the problems is, again, this sort of black and white thinking where just because there are some social norms that are oppressive, therefore all social norms must be destroyed. And that leads anarchism to some atrocity-inducing madness. For example, there is a long correlation between anarchism and pedophilia and support for pedophilia. Wait. That's a beautiful line. Thank you so much for asking. How about something relevant? I've been talking about rape culture all day, And pedophilia and the support of pedophilia is not rape culture?
He's a rape victim.
And I stand with him. Anybody that's against him, because I'm a rape victim by another rape man. Okay? So just because I'm big and just because he's big doesn't make us rapists. We're survivors. Okay?
Okay. Okay. Thank you. And okay, so actually, it seems you're acting like this is a spurious connection. So we're going to play Jeopardy. We're going to play queer theory. We're going to play queer theory pedophilia Jeopardy. Okay, answer. Commonly called the godfather of queer theory. Who is Foucault? Okay, 100 points. Foucault. Another way to ask this is who argued, no, I guess the answer would be, argued for the eradication of age of consent laws as in down to infants.
Who is Foucault?
Thank you.
Okay, next one. The author of the founding document of queer theory. Who is Gail Rubin? What percentage? No, the answer is 50%. Question is?
The amount in that article that was a defense of pedophilia, specifically, quote, boy lovers, so men fuck boys.
Oh. And since you're not believing me, quote, this is in the founding document of queer theory. Like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it is difficult to find defenders of their civil liberties, let alone for their erotic orientation. That's in the founding document of queer theory. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm using facts. A thousand apologies. One must never let facts in the way. Oh, and she also compared, by the way, she compared pedophilia to a preference for spicy food. The thing is, I have never heard of anyone who has to have years of therapy because they ate hot and sour soup. Okay, so up to 200. Now it is pedophilia and queer theory for 300. That would be author of Macho Sluts. Author of Macho Sluts and Public Sex. Pat Califia. Wait. What was it somebody said? Stay relevant.
If you are denying, but you want to talk about trying to uplift women because of the rape culture, heck, I'll let every single fucking woman say no. You're exclusionary. You're not a fucking revolutionary, and it's bullshit.
Okay, let's talk about Pat Califia. Okay, here's something from one of Pat Califia's books. You know, it's really interesting. It's really interesting that when I actually start talking about the relationship between queer theory and anarchism and pedophilia, that it becomes, they really want to shut me up now. Okay. So here's Pat Califia. Pat Califia. Oh, wait, just a second. I was accused of homophobia because I'm against pedophilia. Who is it who actually makes the connections between that? Shoes, looking for. Okay, here's something by Pat Califia. Pat Califia has written, any child old enough to decide whether or not she or he wants to eat spinach, play with trucks, or wear shoes is old enough to decide whether or not she wants to run around naked in the sun, masturbate, sit in someone's lap, or engage in sexual activity, by which she does not mean play doctor, she means with adults. And she's very clear about that because she also says that pedophiles should be more and not less invested in children's lives. Okay, so we're at 300. 400 is the most famous queer theorist of today. Answer. No, it is not Judith Butler. It's who is Judith Butler? Okay, Judith Butler is the most famous queer theorist of the day. And I have a serious question for everybody who is hating me in a moment. Except I have to spell intergeneration correctly. Intergeneration. Up. Okay.
See you, all of you supporters here who do not care about trans people's lives. Every person here supported their
Okay. Here's a great quote from Judith Butler.
And it's the fucking truth. Are you supporting it?
Okay. So Judith Butler wrote, so I keep adding this qualification. When incest is so I keep adding this qualification. When incest is a violation, suggesting I think there may be occasions in which it's not. Why would I talk that way? Well, I do think that there are probably forms of incest that are not necessarily traumatic, and which gain their traumatic character by virtue of the content of social saying that they produce. Yeah, that's Judith Butler. That's one of the queer heroes. Okay, now we have for 500 we have the last one in the queer theory and pedophilia. The answer is queer theorist who has spoken out strongly against pedophilia. Who is no one? Not a single one. Because the entire thing is based on transgressing. Yeah, I know. Dear fucking God.
We're folks don't need somebody to explain church culture to us. We have to fucking know our own.
Okay. The question is. Okay, so we have like 2 minutes left, and
Do you believe that all queer?
of course not. What I'm saying is that queer theory promotes pedophilia. Queer theory itself. And I gave citations from actual queer theorists. Or we could talk about Allen Ginsberg. He has some dreadful lines about how children would get used to our lovemaking if only the adults would stay out of it.
Hakeem Bey.
Hakeem Bey, for God's sake. So my point is, this is not. Queer theory, I think, is really hard. And thank you for asking respectfully. You were the one who asked, right? Yes, I think queer theory is a really harmful philosophy. And I want to be really clear that, yeah, it has nothing to do with homosexuality. And it emerged in the 1980s really as a response to a lot of, especially lesbian feminist ideas. And it also emerged through postmodernism, which we can talk about or not if you want. But the point is that I think that it is a mistake to, some of the strongest opponents of queer theory are lesbians. And there are also not as many, but there are a large number of gay men who are very strongly opposed to queer theory.
On that, would any
12:30. So it's 12:05. No platform. No platform.
Right. No, I want to, excuse me, person on the right. I mean, you were polite. I want to hear your question. I honestly want to hear your question.
okay, so I'm asking for a place of myself.
Okay.
I You say that there is a basis that in queer theory that, but into actuality, has a link with pedophilia and supporting that in its roots. And I would say, there's obviously some level of truth in what anyone says. I would say that whether separately or not, that's not my question. What it's on is that you can find that in any community, like you said previously, and that buying community, there is some basis in reality, because that's what you look at. You're not looking at what's on paper, you're looking at what's on the actual basis. So would you say that within DRG itself, or sorry, DGR itself, would you say that it contains its own members or its own so-called doctrine that can be labeled as some form of pedophilia or misogyny or whatever you want to label it as to prove that that community itself therein is just as bad as you claim queer theory is?
Thank you for the question. And there will be individuals in any organization who are shits. In contrast to your comrades, or they might not be your comrades, I just want to thank you again for your courtesy. My problem with queer theory is not necessarily individuals who ascribe to theory. There are decent people who are Christians, there are decent people. My problem with queer theory is its foundation in postmodernism, and its David Halperin is a pretty big queer theorist, and one of the things he says is that queer is by definition against all that is normal. And that's my response too. It's like, I mean, so paying 7% sales tax is normal? So if I pay 20% sales tax, that's queer? So the point is that my problem with queer theory is that it is based on a blanket attack on all that is considered normal. And I don't think that is, like, even if I lived in Nazi Germany, it would not be useful to fuck a child. It would not be helpful to fuck a child, even in Nazi Germany. Okay? Shut the fuck up. The point is, I'm trying to have a reasonable conversation with a reasonable person. The point is that even within a horribly oppressive structure, there are still norms that are worth keeping. And so my problem with queer theory is that one of the problems with queer theory is it is too broad of it doesn't have the capacity in its formation from the beginning. It is based on transgressing norms. That's what it's based on. But again, some norms should be transgressed and some norms should not be transgressed. That's it.
You, after that. Which one should be?
I say, representing myself, I'm not going to affiliate myself with any particular organization. This is personal. I desperately want to like you. I have, members of people that are close to me that do either know you or like you in some manner or fashion. But I myself am a trans individual. I identify specifically as a trans woman. So I'm a woman. And I want to say that I disagree with your ideology on that. Even if you don't proclaim your own ideology, that it promotes exclusion against transgender individuals, and I don't agree with that. I believe that trans women are women, and whether or not I don't even know if you proclaim to that ideology because you don't talk about it. You avoid it in some manner, speaking so that you didn't show what you're saying. From what I've seen.
Right, which is why this whole thing is I was here to talk about the murder of the planet.
Because you all make it this way.
And that was my point, is to talk about the murder of the planet. And so it's time to go.
few more minutes.
Okay. So you're okay, and I have profound respect for your maturity and capacity. I mean, here's the thing. Like I mentioned Eve Ensler a couple times.
Answer the question.
I mentioned Eve Ensler a couple times, and part of the reason I did, I was hoping that somebody was going to say, you know, Eve Ensler disagrees with you on some issues, and she does, and that's great because we're both adults, and that's what you do. So I mean, you have presented yourself respectfully, and that's great, and we disagree. Wonderful. And now we have a couple minutes, so if people are going to complain here that I don't say the mantra of trans women are women, can you please define the word woman and define the word trans woman? And before you go, I'm going to say that definitions cannot be tautological. Like a square, you can't say a square is a thing that's a square. We know that. And also it has to be verifiable / falsifiable, such that if I say I'm a vegetarian, and then you say, what did you have for dinner last night? And I say bacon, it's like, that's falsifiable. And this is true. I'm not picking on you. This is generically true for definitions. So if I were going to go to do a protest of Donald Trump, and I were going to say, remove all dams, and he looked at me and he said, okay, great, define remove and define dams, I hope I could do it. So people here are really mad because I don't say trans women or women. So define woman and define trans woman.
I think you're a lovely woman, just saying. You don't have to
Well, that's actually not a definition of woman.
Can anybody do it?
Yeah, I do look it up. Sorry, go ahead, please.
Forgive me, I'm conflicted in how I want to express myself.
I got you.
I would say that a woman is just an identity that is prescribed based on our preconceived notions of our notion of gender. Gender itself is just something that we created arbitrarily. And then trans woman is just another further abstraction from that, in that for some reason we prescribe that sex is related to gender originally. And we have become either, you could say, more progressive or more conservative in that idea on what political ideology prescribed to. But mostly you can say that being a woman is just the notion that we have these specific adjectives or specific concepts ascribed to one notion. In the same way that being transgender is, for some reason, my sex doesn't match my gender. And because of that, for whatever reason, we have to have this notion that there is something that is transgender, or that is, beyond gender, I guess, or whatever. And that, to me, what is even just gender and being transgender within yourself?
I'm sorry. What? I don't understand your definition of woman. Can you?
Woman is just it's something that's it's an amalgamation of things that we decided was a woman. It's just
No, wait, no, hold on. But if woman is an amalgamation of things we decided are woman, that's tautological. Again, remember, we can't. That's like saying a square is the thing that we decided is a square.
That is the best way that I, and myself, and someone who's young and maybe isn't great at being able to say.
Okay, so can I, if I may say something as somebody who is older and is being respectful with you?
age is not.
Oh my God, these people.
We can see the older seasons.
But nobody's still defined.
I just object. And you put these people into the box. Each one's gonna be Eurocentric. What are you doing?
What are you doing?
Is for the next protest to do is come up with a really succinct.
Oh my God!
You like to look
That's fine.
now.
Okay, we have a question up here.
I've been watching this and I'm loving it, and I have to say I really respect their voice and yours. My concern here is the labeling and judgment that's going on. If we rise above the labeling, gender as a label, all of these words, why don't we rise above and support each other as Jensen is saying, hey, why don't we support the world?
Jensen is supporting.
But innocent, yeah, what's one foot? That's what you said. That was the question. My point is this. Question, not the logic. This mother here. Why don't we also realize that we want to support all of them? Whether, whatever label, whatever structure, whatever culture, coming together in partnership that is nurturing. Yeah, I'm saying you guys understand things, you don't get a partnership.
Okay,
Accept it for what it is. Let's all rise above the shade.
okay, we got to put up the chairs.
Thank you so much, Derrick Jensen, for agreeing to do this podcast. It's an honor to have you. Maybe you could give the people that are listening, in case they're not familiar with you, sort of a mini trajectory, or as long as you want. It doesn't have to be in 2 sentences or less, about maybe what got you into the public eye and where you're at today and what we're going to talk about today.
Well, thank you. And thank you for having me. It's an honor to be here. I'm a writer. I have 28 books out, and the sort of central bit about my work is that um, this way of living is not sustainable, and when it's over, I would rather there's more of the wild nature left rather than less. If I had to sum up everything, I really a lot of my work comes at the intersection of environmental destruction, violence against women, violence against children, and how how it is that people come to commit atrocities, and how it is that we collectively end up doing such crazy things. And um, my first big book was, or first reasonably well read book was A Language Older Than Words. And that book was originally supposed to be about how about the dissonance between our public and private discourse about communication with non-humans. By which I mean, we've all, had conversations with our dogs or cats, and if the dog can say, it's like, how does the dog let you know that it's out of water? It looks at the water dish, looks at you, looks at the water dish, and that's a form of communication. And so I was going to ask a whole bunch of people, and I was asking a bunch of people, have you had conversations with non-humans? And so many people were saying, yes, but I've never talked about it in public because people think I'm crazy. And the conversations weren't just with dogs, they were with plants, they were with wild animals, all these moving experiences people had. But so I was gonna write a book about basically can non-humans think or can't they? And then I couldn't write the book because it would have been crap. And then I finally the thing that turned, and the reason I'm telling you all this because all of my career has been about this really since all my work. The thing that turned was instead of asking why is it how 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 can some people have conversations or can non-humans have conversations or can't they? Everything turned to on the question, why is it some people listen and why is it some people can't? And then the book I was still struggling to write. I couldn't do it. And then the first few sentences came to me, and this is the reason I'm telling you this whole story, is that probably some of the best words I've ever written were in order to maintain our way of living, we must tell lies to each other and especially to ourselves. It's not necessary the lies be particularly believable, but merely that they be erected as barriers to truth. And that I was like the smartest. I mean, I didn't write it, the muse wrote it, but it's the smartest thing I've ever Britain. And so a lot of my work has been about what are the lies we tell ourselves in order to maintain this way of living, and what are the lies that we believe. And one of the best people I ever interviewed um, was Robert J. Lifton, who wrote The Nazi Doctors, and he's really I think he's dead now. He was the world's foremost authority on the psychology of genocide, and he said if I were going to sum up all of his work, he wouldn't be unhappy with this. I think if I summed up all of his work in one thing, it would be before you can commit any mass atrocity, you have to have what he called a claim to virtue. You have to convince yourself and others that what you're doing is not an atrocity, but instead something good. And so the Nazis weren't committing mass murder and genocide, they were purifying the Aryan race. We're not killing the planet, we're developing natural resources. And the same is true on a personal level. I have never once in my life been a jerk. By which I mean every time I've been a jerk, I've had it fully rationalized. That person so deserved it because what they did to me. It's like it's basically just what are the justifications? And not just justifications, but what are the I'm gonna move forward a little bit. And in my book, Culture of Make Believe, one of my favorite lines from that was any hatred felt long enough no longer feels like hatred. It feels like economics or religion or just the way things are. And so how can well, sorry that I'm jumping all over, but
Do
this
it.
is an introduction to my work. This is
Exactly.
like this is all what my books are like. And so there's a line I wrote in another book that never got published. It was one of my favorite bits I've ever written, which is about pornography. And how is it that men, put women who defend pornography into another category. How is it that men can defend pornography? And don't they feel like wankers for doing so? It's like they'll talk about themselves as lovers of free expression, as and it's like, okay, what you're doing is you are defending a man's right to masturbate. We're not even talking about man's right to masturbate. Nobody's saying nobody can masturbate. It's a man's right to look at pictures of women in sexually submissive poses as a constitutional right. And if a woman wants to argue that, that's a whole nother discussion. But this would be like trying to argue that, I mean, you could say that it's an extraordinary argument to make. And we make arguments. We collectively make arguments. I just yesterday was doing a book club. It's a deep green resistance book club. And the book we did yesterday, I happen to have here, and it's an ad, buy this book. Anyway, this is the book we did yesterday, The Myth of Human Supremacy. And the central part of that book was humans pretty much consider ourselves to be the supreme creature on the planet, which is an odd concept in the first place. But then we're the ones who come up with the definitions. And all of those definitions just so happen to make it so we're the supreme creatures on the planet. And that whole book is basically about, isn't that kind of weird? It's like, how if I did that personally? That I am superior to you because I have written 28 books. And I call somebody superior. It's not whether they can do differential equations, which I did very poorly in college. That's not how you tell whether somebody's smart. It's like I've chosen these things. The way you tell if somebody's smart is if they speak English. Like, s- and that's what we do on a larger scale. We come up with all these things. So basically, all of my work has been about what are the ways that we justify continuing behavior that is not always okay. I'm going to jump another direction. And if you don't like this, we can just start all the way over. But
Do it.
R.D. Lang, the psychiatrist, was very interesting because he probably described abusive mentalities better than anybody else, and he himself was a batterer. So it's just he was able to describe this topic. And he talked about um, the three rules of a dysfunctional family. And these are also, I think, the three rules of a dysfunctional culture. And rule A is don't. Rule A1 is rule A does not exist. And rule A2 is never discuss the existence or non-existence of rules A1, or A2. So what this would mean within a family like my own, my father was extremely violent. What this would mean is we could talk about anything we wanted except for the violence, so we had to pretend wasn't happening. And then also couldn't talk about the fact that we couldn't talk about the violence that wasn't happening. We wouldn't talk about the fact that we couldn't talk about the fact that we couldn't talk about the fact that we couldn't talk about the violence that wasn't happening. Talk about anything else in the world. And we see the same thing on every level. I mean, if we want to jump into the trans issue, no debate. That's their line. And there are, other things that we could talk about with this that, um, we can't talk about corporations that are, we can't talk honestly about, the fact that there's too many humans. As soon as you say there's too many humans, it's like you're being racist. Like, well, no, I'm not saying there's too many humans of color. I'm saying there's too many humans total. And so it's just, I'm always really interested about those things we can't talk about. Oh, and I'm saying one more thing, and then I'll let you get another question, which is I love this line that I read in the 1980s by a guy by the name of Robert Coombs, I believe, that was unquestioned assumptions are the real authorities of any culture. And that's how a culture runs is on, like, you can hear somebody on TV say, how can we make the US economy grow? Well, that presumes we want an ever growing economy. It, you can't have infinite growth on a finite planet. And so, we can go any direction you want with this with, what are the unquestioned assumptions? Oh, I'll tell you another one. I will let you get in a word sometime. Um, I was interviewing Judith Herman back in the 90s. She wrote Trauma and Recovery, fantastic book. And in there, she was talking about the work of Peggy Reeves Sanday, who described why some cultures are high rape and some are low rape. And there are markers of the high rape cultures. If they're highly militarized, they're more likely to be a high rape culture. Low militarized is probably likely less to be a low rape culture. And there's other characteristics. And one of them that is just a great example of the unquestioned assumptions is she said that if a culture has a male creator deity as opposed to a couple or a female creator deity, that it's more likely to be a high rate cult. And then she said something that changed my world, which was, and it is kind of counterintuitive to have a male creator deity. And I was probably, let's say, 33 at the time.
Mhm.
And I'm not always stupid, but it had never occurred to me how counterintuitive it is to have a male creator deity. A female makes sense, she gives birth. A couple makes sense,
Mhm.
but a male? And it had never once occurred to me until she said that. And it didn't even occur to me when she said male creator deity is a marker of a high rate culture. It only occurred to me when she said, that is counterintuitive, isn't it? I'm like, huh. And I should probably be pretty proud of myself that I actually recognized it in the moment instead of disagreeing with her. And then 3 years later, coming up with this thing. Like, it's usually how we change our minds, Somebody says this happens to me all the time. It happens. I do this to my friends. My friend, like Leah Keith or something, will have this great idea, and I'll say, "Nah, it doesn't make any sense." And then a year later, I come up to her and I say, "Hey, I had this great idea. What if?" And she's like, "Yeah, I told you that a year ago." Um, and I don't feel too bad about that because I think that's actually how minds change.
Mhm. For sure.
They don't anyway, so I'm pretty proud of myself that it only took me 30 seconds after Judith Herman said it for me to realize that it's a crazy so I love those places where we have unquestioned assumptions that we then explore. It doesn't mean the assumptions are always bad. It's just those are the real authorities. That's how we live is by not questioning a bunch of things. And again, I'm not saying that we have to question every single thing. Um, anyway, so that's sort of what my work is about, and I've now scared everybody away from reading any of my books.
I highly doubt it with our audience. I think their interest is piqued.
Well, it seems like there are systems in place to bolster this type of ideology, that there are people who benefit from the lack of questioning. So, if you look at, like, the trans ideology, the medical community benefits from the lack of questioning. The pharmaceutical, industrial complex benefits. It becomes dangerous when you push back against that, because what it's saying is that you're coming from a place of privilege by even asking those questions.
Um, I completely agree with what you're saying, and that there are, no matter what subject we're talking about, there are going to be. Yeah, I've always loved this line. It's was said by Henry Adams. I think it was Henry Adams, more than 100 years ago, and it was, "The press is the hired agent of a moneyed system, set up for no other purpose than to tell lies where the interests are concerned." So it's not just. I remember talking to a reporter when I lived in Spokane, about some expose he had done, and he said, "If this was an expose of the car dealerships, it never could have gotten published because they're the ones who pay for most of the ads that keep the newspaper running." And so it's just this is this is not a new thing, and it's not. It's just it kind of horrifies me because I've been writing about the press lying for decades, and I still get outraged when they say she raped her with her penis. And it's just, how can they do that? This is supposed to be. And I keep going back to this thing that a friend of mine said to me 35 years ago, which was, "Look, Derek, you expect for the corporation known as Union Carbide to lie. Why would you expect for the corporation called the New York Times to not lie? It's just a corporation." But somehow I keep falling into that idea that I love Andrea Dworkin's bit about how writing is a sacred task. I'll see if I can find the exact quote because I love it so much. Uh, Look up Dworkin. Uh, and I have always believed this. Um, those of us who love reading and writing believe that being a writer is a sacred trust. It means telling the truth. It means being incorruptible. It means not being afraid and never lying. Those of us who love reading and writing believe that being a writer is a sacred trust. It means telling the truth. It means being incorruptible. It means not being afraid and never lying. And I keep applying that to journalism when I probably shouldn't. And I keep applying that to, I mean, I get ultra outraged when I should stop doing this since there's the R.D. Lang quote about what we can't talk about. But I get ultra outraged when you have some writer, Andrea Long Chu, talking about how the essence of womanhood is, blank eyes and expect an asshole. It's like, that's just, and how the heck when the pure eyes, and how is everybody calling him a woman? And it's, so I get, there is for me a difference between a flack for Union Carbide lying and a press person lying. But um so anyway, but really I think the whole with the trans issue, yeah, there is the money involved, but I think that there are sadly much deeper issues. I don't think it's just a case. I think that following the money is important, but I don't think that's all. And I think that there are two places that I want to go with this. One of them is the great chain of being. And the great chain of being is one of the ideas that's really sort of run the culture for a long time. It's the ancient Greeks described it, and it's that God is at the top,
Mhm.
and God is disembodied mind. And then below God comes the angels, then come men, then comes women, then comes non-human animals, then comes plants, and then down to soil, which is pure body, no mind, according to this idea. And humans are a battleground of mind and body, with women being closer to body than men for reasons we can get into in a minute. But the point is that what's up here is, again, disembodied mind. And these days it's just machines.
Mhm.
Machines are at the top, perfection. And this is going to relate to trans issue in a minute. Um, and part of the reason I think that we have this, there's a few reasons we can go into for a moment, which is one of them is, I think, envy on the part of males. Because females, I got a lot of this analysis from Karen Horney, um, that women create life with their bodies and nature creates life naturally. And that's great if men recognize that our role is that we're essentially reproductively redundant. That most men, you need a few, but most men, if you had 100 people in a village, 50 men, 50 women, and 49 women die, your village is done.
Mhm.
If 49 men die, yeah, you have a genetic bottleneck, but
Yes.
you're it's your village is not dead. So women play a much and that's fine if men recognize that we have other roles to play. But if we end up feeling envious of that, if we want to feel superior to women, it's like, well, they create life. What do I do? Well, one of the things we can do, there's a great line by Richard Drinnen that was, if women can create life and I can destroy it, who's the more powerful?
Mhm.
And there's another part of this, which is that if if women create life and if nature creates life, and if that makes me feel somehow inferior, what I can do is I can demean the life that they create and I can valorize the life that the stuff I can create. So what ends up happening is, wow, the body is worth nothing. Women create life, big deal. Now, scientists, if we can create life in a lab, that's something. They get so excited when they create enzymes that are one step closer to creating life in a lab. It's like, we're so close to creating life. It's like, yeah, and female mice do this every day, and
Exactly.
female rabbits, and there was this astronomer back 25 years ago. Somebody asked him why we collectively need to explore Mars. And he said, to answer that most important question of all, which is, are we all alone? It's like, dude, how can you even ask that? The only reason you can ask that is because you think you're superior to all this other life. Okay, so that's great. I'm criticizing these people. I'm going, you're you're falling for this great chain of being. But then if I ask you or if I ask myself, name the three most beautiful pieces of art, for me it would probably be Sistine Chapel, Mona Lisa, Beethoven's Ninth. I was like, what about the color of leaves in the fall? What about a sunset? What about frog song? That doesn't count. That's not art because we didn't create it with our minds. This is that great chain of being or inventions. Greatest inventions, the pump, the lever, the screw, the wheel, gunpowder. What about proprioception? That's how you know where your hand is when it's behind your back. What
Mhm.
about metabolism? What about photosynthesis? What about sex? Those are all extraordinary inventions, but they don't count because we didn't do them. So we collectively, that's one of those assumptions, and it's going to come back to trans in a second. We fundamentally disrespect anything created by the body and fundamentally valorize anything created by here. So it's not just that Rothblatt and Pritzker and Stryker are putting a bunch of money into this. And it's not just that the Pritzkers bought Obama, it's like, sure, that's all part of it. But also, what men think in our heads is more important than what women are. We're dealing with thousands of years of patriarchy, of valuing what man thinks over what physical existence is. And this comes back to one of the central things of all my work. So there have been people who have gone, oh my gosh, Derek, how could you possibly have gone anti-trans? You your work was so important to me at one point, and it's like my work has always been about physical reality is more important than what you think about it. So so here's a joke. This is so funny. I love this. When I used to do my talks for Cultural Make Believe 25 years ago, um, one of the jokes I would tell at the beginning is that the way I wrote that book is my publisher asked me to do a 5-page introduction to an encyclopedia of hate groups. And the first thing I did is ask, what's a hate group? And then the book exploded into 700 pages because the first thing I did was go to a KKK website. And the KKK website said, we are not a hate group. We're a love group because we love white people. I would say that. Everybody would laugh. And then I would say, okay, well, that raises the question, what do you believe? Do you believe rhetoric or do you not believe rhetoric? Because if you believe rhetoric, then the KKK is not a hate group. And everybody would laugh. Those same people would try to kill me for saying, a man says he's a woman. What do you believe? Rhetoric or do you believe reality? And those same people who laughed at the one joke
Mhm.
would storm the stage for the second one. But it's the same deal.
Yep.
What are you going to believe? Why should I was just interviewing somebody 2 days ago, um, Elspeth Cipher. She's a former, justice of it's not a state Supreme Court because Massachusetts isn't a state. It's whatever their equivalent of the state Supreme Court is. And she talked about how at one point, what do they call it? At one point, courts allowed spectral evidence. And she was very proud of the Massachusetts, whatever their equivalent of the Supreme Court is, because they ended the witch trials in America by no longer accepting spectral evidence. The ghosts, that a ghost told me that this person, and so she's very proud of that in this lineage. And then she said about the trans issue, it's like, that is what they're asking us to accept, spectral evidence.
Yes.
And, um, and that in the United States, that went out with the witch trial, pre-United States in the colonies,
Mhm.
that went out with the witch trials. Yet today, it has crept back into law. And I would take us all back to this great chain of being where we fundamentally disrespect physical reality. We have a profound, we couldn't be killing the planet if we didn't disrespect physical reality. Or, or Um, so I just need to check in again. Are you enjoying me jumping all over with this? Are you still following a thread or do you want
Yeah,
Absolutely.
for
okay,
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah,
great.
yeah. Ramble
I
on.
Okay,
do
so
I
I'm gonna tell
I do have
go
a
ahead,
question
please. Do
about
interrupt me anytime you want.
I have a question about cultural amnesia or cultural nihilism. It seems like there's this undertone of a, uh, I hate to say this, but like female laziness, like this lack of defending your womanhood because you know you're the life giver, you know you have this magical power, uh, so you don't really need to defend this. And so you'll allow men to basically be misogynist and take over female spaces because innately you know your power as a woman. So it's like treating the world like they're a child and just kind of going along with what they believe, even though innately you know that that's not reality. Do you have any thoughts on that?
So I hear you and um I I believe that that does account for some part of the lack of female resistance to this. I think that there is some of that. And I would like to add another piece in addition to yours,
Mhm.
which is that women have several thousand years of if you speak up against the man, you're going to have your face beaten in.
Mhm.
And which is what we see in the trans issue too, that the women who do, I mean, first off, is like, oh, yes, okay, I need to be nurturing, I need to be nice. And also, yes, you can't really get to me because there is this magical power. There's that. And then So I read this random person. I was just on some forum, a few of those still exist apart from Facebook. I
Mhm.
was on this forum where this woman was saying something she does for on when she dates someone new, something she does on an early date is she will tell the man no about something fairly small,
Mhm.
and and then she will gauge his response to her having said no. It's like, third date, it's like, "Do you wanna go to this restaurant?" And she's like, "Nah, how about this one?" And if he completely flips out, it's like, "Well, okay, see you later, Chuck."
Mhm.
Um, and there is this narcissistic stage when one of my favorite lines also from Culture Make Believe. So I got stuck at some point because the number of extrajudicial killings, lynchings, whatever you wanna call them, after the American Civil War went up. And so they were killing the white people were killing more black people after the Civil War than in the slavery days. And I was trying to figure out why, like, what is it, for a few weeks, and then one day, uh, I don't wanna get too woo-woo, but a tree and Nietzsche gave me the answer. And it was a quote by Nietzsche that I didn't understand, and I'm walking by this tree, and the tree makes it all clear. And the quote was, um, "One does not hate when one can despise."
Hmm.
And suddenly it fell into place that as long as if you are I mean, in some ways, culture make believe is about the relationship between perceived entitlement, exploitation, and atrocity. And as long as my perceived entitlement is not threatened, as long as it's intact, I I merely despise. Despise comes from the root despecere, which means to look down upon. Spectacles. It means
Mhm.
to look down upon. So I merely look down upon. I feel contempt for those whom I'm exploiting. But if my ability to exploit them is threatened, my contempt turns over into this outright hatred that was underlying all along.
Mhm.
The one of the titles that we almost did for the culture make believe was to call it beneath contempt, because that was also what it was about. Is what's beneath contempt is the hatred.
Mhm.
And so the point is that there is this this woman. There is the analysis that you had that's very good, and then in addition to that, there is the understanding that if you tell a narcissistic man no, something very, very bad is going to happen to you, and we
Mhm.
have several thousand years of experience, and that's exactly what we see. To There are so many uh, women have said to me about my stance on the trans issue. Um, "Oh, the trans have never done anything bad to me. They've never threatened me. It's just ridiculous. They don't do any cancel culture." And it's like, okay, just do an experiment. Just say, "Trans women are men." Just say that out
Exactly,
loud,
exactly.
and then
And then
watch,
duck.
and it's exactly what I was talking about, that hatred that was underneath.
Yeah.
So I think there's a lot of that too. Just it is several thousand years of survival. But I had a fair amount of therapy in my late 20s and early and through my 30s, and an early therapist had a very bad suggestion. She said, so, my father was very violent. My brother had epilepsy from blows to the head.
Hmm.
He broke my sister's arm. He raped multiple of us. And um, my first therapist said, well, what would Laura Ingalls Wilder have done? She would have jumped on his back and started pounding and trying to stop him. Because I was like 7, and I would just sit by. I would sit and watch while he beat my siblings. And she was like, "Oh, you should have done something." And my second, longer therapist was like, "That's terrible advice. I can't believe a therapist gave you that
No
advice. A
shit.
7-year-old who jumps on the back of a 40-year-old man is gonna die." I
Yeah.
mean,
Mhm.
that's just ridiculous. And that's one of the lessons that sort of learned helplessness
Mhm.
is one of the things that is a central lesson. And also saying yes when you really want to say no.
Mhm.
Those are two of the absolute central lessons that abuse teaches to the victims.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Is what the abuser is trying to do, what the perpetrator is trying to do, is to create a willing slave. There's a great line in the battered women's movement, which is one good beating lasts a year. Um, you don't have to beat them once you've and also, I'm getting all this from Judith Herman. Also, if you and life, and if you can get a person to betray her moral code, if you can get her to participate in her own degradation, you don't ever have to beat her again
Mhm.
because and so that's the point of a lot of this perpetration in the first place is to create all these compliant uh, victims who consent to their own oppression. That's the point of the whole system, all from top to bottom,
Yeah.
is
And then
to get us to do those. Sorry, go ahead.
The Trojan horse of that is toxic empathy. Because and I also see it as a social contagion that women who are transing their children are getting a lot of social credit and social attention from their friends and their peers, like they're somehow heroic. So I think that that's also an element of um, really wanting to impress your friends by another degree of oppression that you feel like, oh, my child is sick.
Yeah, it's Munchausen, a different form. Um, yes, I agree with that, and also I agree about the toxic empathy, and I just want to say as well that one of the things that's really toxic about it is that it is not situation appropriate. And what I mean by that is I I we talk about identification with the oppressor, and we can all use that as sort of buzz language, but I think within abusive situations, it is not buzz language at all, but literally life-saving. Because when you're in an abusive situation, when you have no power, you you must be highly attuned to every slight change in the musculature of the person who could kill you.
Mhm.
And as a child, you have no power. And also, as I like to say, my life did not depend on making me happy. And it didn't depend on making my siblings happy. Didn't depend on making my mom happy. It depended on everybody making the old man happy.
Mhm.
And so we learn that. And in that situation, that sort of what becomes toxic empathy is absolutely life-saving.
Mhm.
But what it does is it sets up a pattern that later on we continue to identify with the oppressor and we do it, it becomes second nature, almost even first nature. And where it's like even so when I was writing Culture Make Believe, I taught at Supermax prison. And some of my students were self-described sociopaths. And what I thought honestly about many of them was that the people who really should have been in prison were their parents.
Mhm.
I'm not saying these people shouldn't because they had done horrible, horrible crimes, but many of them didn't stand a chance. I had one who had been put out to prostitution at the age of 4.
Mm.
I had I mean, they're just horrific stories. And I have a good friend who has a PhD in psychology, and we would talk about them. And she said, you realize that even the ones who are stone cold sociopaths, probably much of their behavior was life saving as a kid. You know, if everybody in your family, including you, is getting beaten, it makes perfect sense to not have any feelings for your siblings. To, that's one direction you can go is not that empathy. You not only get that empathy, the toxic empathy with the oppressor, you also learn to despise all the other victims,
Mm-hmm.
which is how we end up with so many adult adult children abused, people abused as children. When they become adults, they often end up hating the other victim or
Mm-hmm.
the bystander more than they hate the perp.
Mm-hmm.
And partly because that's safer, and also partly because they learned as children to despise the other victims. And I don't tell this story very often, and I probably shouldn't, but I'm going to anyway. Um, in my 30s, I dated a couple of women who I was the first non-abusive guy that they ever dated, and I thought, and I'm sorry, I was making it really terrible. I thought this is going to be really easy because all I have to do is be nice. I don't have to
Yeah,
like do cartwheels or
exactly.
handstands. I don't have to like
Prove
go out of
yourself.
my way to be super nice. I just have to be decent, and that's gonna be way better than anything else I've ever had.
Exactly.
So it's like, I'm on easy street. Sorry if that sounds horrible, but
I relate. I
anyway, it
totally
didn't
relate.
work anyway
Yeah.
because I was b because I was the first nice guy they'd been with, all of a sudden, they had the safety to express all of the anger that they had built up over their previous decades
Mm-hmm.
against men. Suddenly, there's a nice outlet, and I'm like, "Oh, that did not work very well."
But you're
Um,
also a foreigner in that situation. You're a foreigner to that woman. So she's playing out the old role that she's used to playing, and she's going to try to manipulate you into the role of becoming an abuser. So you may not lift a hand, but emotionally you may become abusive, or by neglect you may become abusive. So it's the dynamic that starts to get played out of let me get back into what I know.
right, right, and there's this great line about, borderlines that is, "I hate you, don't leave me,"
Mhm, I have
and,
that book.
um,
It's a
and
great book.
there's, a way this manifested in my own relationship history was that, and I wasn't emotionally abusive or anything, but I could only accept, and I saw this in other people too. I could only accept a certain amount of closeness. So I wanted
Mhm,
to be this close. So if they're this far away, I'll pull them in. But if they try to get this far, this close, then I'm going to push them back to five. I'm going to push them from 3 spaces to 5 spaces. Um, and it was all because it was too scary to be at 3 or 2 or 1.
mhm.
Um,
And I think also in the trans dynamic, a lot of these parents are giving the children too much agency.
Oh, yeah.
So, what becomes abusive in that dynamic is the child is constantly being questioned and asked and kind of painted into a corner where they don't really know the rules of engagement of being in that corner. So, they're just kind of going along with it without really understanding what they're complying with.
Plus, they probably subconsciously realize that their parents are getting something from it, like
Yeah.
they're feeding on them,
Yeah.
and they know they begin to know what the food consists of, so they're like, "Sure, yeah, we can do that." Like, I'm a girl, like
Yeah.
well, add to this that children are just crazy little beings. And I mean, I can't. Okay, so this is just one example among a bazillion that when I was about 7, I had seen people jump off roofs in movies,
Mhm.
and they would jump off a roof and they would roll and land
Mhm.
and get up running like the soldiers or something.
Yep.
So I jumped off the roof, and fortunately I didn't break anything, but man, the ground was really hard. That was this is there are reasons that children can't sign contracts.
Mhm.
exactly.
It's just, and I remember even when I was like 10 or 11, oh god, I have to admit it's a little bit older than that. I'm not gonna say how old 'cause it's too embarrassing. I still had this idea that if you really believed fully enough that you weren't gonna run out of gas, you never would. Um, and if you ran out of gas, it was because you didn't believe. You still had that doubt, which is just classic sort of cult thinking. And also, I don't think I'm the only person on the planet that the single most common phrase that my mom ever said to me about anything was because I said so. It
Mm-hmm.
was like, why do I have to go to bed? Because I said so. I don't want to go to bed yet. Well, you're going to because I said so. And then she would also pull this thing, when you get to be a mother, you'll get to say so. I was like, I'm never going to get to be a mother. She's like, well, okay, too bad for you. You're going to bed. It's like at some point there was this really silly movie starring Goldie Hawn and Kurt Russell, I think. I know Goldie Hawn's in it. That uh, at one point, this is back in the 80s or 90s, and they're making a joke of it, but this point is true. One kid steals a necklace from another kid. Ends up it's a really she needs the necklace for some reason. It's a real necklace, not a kid's necklace. She steals a necklace, and then the neighbor mother, who's the mother of the kid who'd stolen the necklace, she's saying, "Oh, it's not fair to take this back from her. We have to like make some sort of arrangement, and we have to." And then Goldie Hawn just grabs the necklace and says, "Somebody has to be an adult here," and walks out with it. And
Exactly.
I mean, it's like that's one of the things that kills me about the whole trans. It's like, where are the adults? And same with all the stuff in sports. So we haven't really talked about sports, but I was a very competitive athlete. I was a conference champion high jumper.
Mm-hmm.
And later I was a coach of high jumpers. And one of my coaches or one of my athletes was a women's junior college national champion.
Mm-hmm.
And I really disagree when people say, oh, the girls need to boycott because the girls didn't create the problem and they only have a certain time they can compete. You know, I only had one one meet where I actually won the championship. If I would have had to boycott that for some reason, it's like that's a terrible. Or if my student would have had to not my student, my athlete would have had to boycott. So I don't think. I think if girls and women want to boycott, I would support it. But as an outsider, I would never suggest it. On the other hand, if my female jumper would have had to compete against males, I would have, as her coach, I would have said, look, you jump, that's your job. Everything else is up to me. It's my job to protect you.
Mm-hmm.
And I would have gotten kicked out of every single meet. I would have been up yelling at the meet officials. I would have been standing there. I would have been forcibly removed. Just like in baseball, you know, when the coach comes out to protect his players.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that would have been me. I would have been, you know, scuffing up the high jump area and being completely ludicrous because that's your job as the adult is to protect the athletes. And it's the same. The athletic directors should be going, no, I'm going to resign and protest. I'm going to make myself a pain in the ass at every single one of these meetings. I'm going to raise this issue. And it's all the parents should be there and all the external adults myself should be there. And I think, I think athletes' job is to compete.
Mm-hmm.
And it's the parents' job to be in there fighting like hell for their kids. Um,
Agreed.
You mentioned something that I want to swing back to when you were talking about communicating with the tree. I would posit that one of the privileges that we have of living in what we would consider a modern society is some people feel a lack of necessity to communicate with nature. That it is almost like we have bifurcated reality where we live in this very technologically based world, and nature is something to be despised or tamped back and held back. But I think one of the
like women.
exactly, I think one of the reasons is because in order to communicate with nature, you have to quiet your mind and you have to quiet the world around you to actually hear nature speak because it speaks with a different language. So, like, I will walk in my yard, for example, in the morning, and it usually happens when I first woken up and I'm taking the dogs out, and I'll see the leaves on the flowers that I've planted, and it looks like they're waving at me. And we're having a dialogue because I've just woken up. These are seeds that I planted. Now they've bloomed and they are speaking to me and I'm speaking back because we have this sentient, symbiotic relationship. I would posit that chemical companies and these these companies that have sold this idea that a perfect lawn looks a certain way, or nature has to be contained in a certain way, and we must have superiority over it. I would say that that is definitely a man-made, not male, but a man-made idea, because men benefit from that system of selling fucking chemicals that kill dandelions, for example.
Okay, first, I completely agree with you. Yes. Um, and two other directions to go. And if I forget the second one, remind me, unruly penis. That's
Watch for
that's
those
the
keywords, kids.
that's the trigger phrase. First, um, John Livingston really helped me understand this, that when I go to a city, on one hand, I feel like sensory overload because there's just so many radios and so many horns honking and sharp corners. But on the other hand, um, all of our sensory perceptions, and this is true even for those of us who live in the country, most of our sensory perceptions are created by or mediated by humans. And that means that we're essentially in an echo chamber, and people in an echo chamber begin to hallucinate. We evolved listening to all these other voices,
Mhm.
and now all we hear are humans. And he believed that most of our ideologies are hallucinations. So we come to believe that the stock market is more important than water. I mean, so I was backstage with I was sharing the stage with Ward Churchill decades ago, and uh, he he and I were talking about the Holocaust, and I said, I can't believe that the Germans were like, in addition to doing all this terrible stuff, they kept really good records of their crimes. Like, they kept meticulous records. Like, how, in addition to being horrific, that's just stupid. And he said, Derek, what do you think GNP is? GNP is a measure of how quickly we're killing the planet. It's a measure of the conversion of the living to this. Okay, so there's that, and we all fall into it. So I did not get a cell phone until like 3 years ago, and I got it mainly because I like listening to audiobooks.
Mhm.
So you can see behind me where I live. I live in this beautiful place, and I will sometimes be walking through the forest listening to Jack Reacher, and then I'm like, "What are you doing? Why?" It's like, so I do this too, and I notice when I turn it off, then not only do I hear more things, but I can see more things.
Mhm.
I'm not I'm not here. So I had this horrible realization about 20 years ago, which is that I touch plastic more than I touch flesh.
Mm.
And what does that mean when you what happens is we come to believe that humans are the only ones with a voice. Humans are the only ones who matter. And we come to believe exactly what you say. And you're right. It is this different time scale. I've lived on this land for 26 years. Oh, so I interviewed Vine Deloria a long time ago. And he used to teach at the University of Colorado. And he said his students would go for a hike in the mountains. And they would come back and they said, wow, I had this really incredible nature experience. No, you had an aesthetic experience.
Mm.
It was really beautiful, but it's like this is like walking past someone on the street, and you see them once and you nod and say hi and have a little moment, as opposed to, I've lived on this land for 26 years and I still see new things, and sometimes it takes years for me to see some pattern or some change. And so here's an example: is there's one place where I walk quite often. Uh, and last night I was walking there listening to a book about the Psalm. Um, and there's some a branch on the ground that is rotting. And at first I noticed little pits in it, woodpecker things. So I looked up online, and there are some types of woodpeckers who do eat out of branches on the ground,
Mhm.
not pileated, I remember that, but other types, there's other types here. But then last night, so for 6 months, I've been seeing more and more pits, and then last night, and there's bazillions of bears here, and last night, I saw that one of them had been ripped apart, And that's why bears have big claws, by the way. They're not predator claws. The reason they have really strong claws is A, to help them climb trees, and B, to help them rip apart logs. So I've lived here 26 years. I see bears every day. I see bear poop every day. And this is the first time I've actually seen a log that has been ripped apart
Mm-hmm.
by bears. It's been 26 years, and there's patterns that'll come and go. Okay, so now I want to get back to the unruly penis.
Okay.
That one of the problems, I'm not making up that phrase. That was St. Augustine, father of the church. He wrote about his unruly penis. So don't blame me. Um, it's he was complaining because the how was it exactly? It's basically that the penis is unruly and is a sign of nature's imperfection. And the reason it's unruly is because it becomes erect when you don't want it to, and sometimes it doesn't become erect when you want it to.
Hmm.
And this is the core of the problem, is we can't control everything about our bodies. We wanna control. We want to You can control a lawn. You can kill everything in it except for the grass. You can control a parking lot.
Mm-hmm.
You can't even control well, a man can't even control his penis, as every 17-year-old knows. Um, and that's that's part of our problem. The fundamental I mean, it's supposed to stand to attention when I want it to and not stand to attention when I don't want it to. And that's the problem with all of wild nature. Like I keep saying, oh, actually,
There is a bear outside.
yeah, there's a bear right there.
Yes, I saw it earlier. Just
So the point is that bears will come or go, and then sometimes I never see them. And did they die? I don't know. Did they just go away? I don't know. It's like that's the thing. You have to realize with wild nature, you will never know.
Mhm.
And also, you don't control it. That's the thing about wild animals. They're wild. They I wrote a book about zoos and how horrible zoos are. And
Mhm.
there was I went to the Detroit Zoo before I wrote it, and there was this sing-song voice that there was this display that you push a button and there would be a sing-song voice come out. And I still remember the song. It was, "All the creatures in the zoo are waiting here just for you." I was like, that's what you are
Oh
teaching
my gosh.
Jeez Louise.
children at the zoo, is that the animals are waiting for you and you're here. It's very pornographic. I made the connection to pornography in that book, that you have, I am the subject, they are the object behind glass, behind
Mhm.
and I can come and go, and they're just waiting here for me. And, um, and the lesson is they're also teaching you I mean, what I say about that, one of the arguments for zoos is that children need to have access to nature. I completely agree. But the thing is, what you need to tell them is if you want to see a bear, little Johnny or little Janie, then you need to live such that the bear wants to see you. And that's it's honestly, that is the lesson of pornography too. Like all these incels, if you want a woman to want you, maybe you have to act such that she wants you. Just a thought. And what else was I gonna say about that? Hold on. Oh yeah, I was gonna tell you this story earlier. That um well, ask me another question. If you don't ask me another question, here's the threat. If you don't ask me another question, then I'm gonna tell you another story.
Do you have anything in the queue?
I would completely agree with the incel, um, observation. I've done a lot of research. My background is in, psychology. I have a bachelor's degree in psychology. And one area of my research was sex dolls and men's desire to have sexual relationships with inanimate objects, and what is the slog towards that? What leads to that? And I would posit that it is also related to a lack of connection with nature as well and a lack of connection with the natural world. And so much of it is about controlling the response of something to you. So you can't control a woman, but you can control a doll. And so then you can upload any script you want that doll to repeat back to you. And it's easier to fall in love with something that's inanimate that you're in control of than falling in love with a woman that may leave you, may be unfaithful, may have her own wants and needs that don't include you necessarily all the time. Um, but what I found is that men who tend to lean in that direction are highly intelligent. They are typically people who did not have sexual relationships in high school, that their sexual development in college was also stunted. And then they wake up one day and they're 40 years old and they're out in the world and they've never held a girl's hand or been out on a date because they were so focused on their studies or their whatever the family dynamic was, but something stunted their growth.
And that led them to fucking dolls, right?
That led them to pornography, which is really, once again, about controlling one's environment, and also having a disconnect from what you're saying. Like, what would I need to be? What type of a man would I need to be to attract this type of woman? Just seeing them as being very dimensional, just two-dimensional, just something to objectify as opposed to seeing them as in their totality.
Do you
So go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, do you think that that's a symptom of giving up or just a placeholder until the real thing comes along?
I think it's a lack of maturity
For sure.
and a lack of being challenged, like in the real world, like actually challenging themselves to ask someone out or to put themselves in a situation where they could potentially be rejected.
So giving up.
What are your thoughts,
Um,
Derek?
well, one reason I was sort of smirking when you were saying some of that was that, let's see, you said intelligent, uh, not much sexual activity in high school, not much sexual activity in college. So first, that describes me. Um, and second, it describes almost everybody I went to college with because I went to the Colorado School of Mines,
Hmm.
which is a bunch of nerds, 83% male.
Hmm.
Um, and so I'm not taking it personally at all. I've never fucked a doll and don't have any interest. And but the thing is, what I was thinking is I think there's another factor. I don't know what it is, but I think probably a lot of my fellow students ended up with reasonably normal. I mean, I like one of my best friends in college uh ended up. I mean, I think he was. I don't think he ever had sex with a doll or used a doll as a masturbation tool. I don't like saying have sex with not because it's not really sex, it's masturbation.
Exactly.
And, like, they talked about a sex doll brothel in the
Hmm.
UK, and it's like, no, it's really a masturbatorium.
Yeah,
Yes. I
with
mean,
props.
brothels are terrible, and this is terrible, but it's I guess they shouldn't have me on their PR team or something because the ad copy would be terrible for a masturbatorium.
It's very
Um,
interesting how those are run too. So I don't know if you
I have no
know.
idea how they're
Okay,
run.
so
No.
the doll is placed in a room and there's like a microphone in the room. And then the man goes in and there's a woman in another space who's actually speaking and walking the man through the sex act with the doll. So she's responding as though she's the doll in another location, observing what he's doing with the doll.
That's even creepier.
Yeah, there's a whole lot going on there.
I mean,
Exhibitionism and
okay, so A, that would have I would have absolutely no interest in that on any level, and in addition, it's like, I know during World War II, and I know in the Cold War, the Nazis and then the Soviets, I'm sure everybody else has too, set up those honeypots where they would
Mhm.
record people
Mhm.
and then blackmail them. And,
Mhm.
that's a lot of the stuff with the Epstein stuff too,
Yeah.
supposedly. And it's like, you're gonna intentionally go into a place where there's a camera and then do this with the it's like, okay, apart from everything else, have you no pride? It's like, and have you no sense of protection in terms of somebody's gonna have this tape of you, like, I I would never be able to check email again for fear I'm gonna get one of those notes that says, "Give me X number of Bitcoin."
Yeah, exactly, like a Black Mirror episode.
Yeah,
Yeah, exactly.
it's just a level of desperation, and again, part of the shame, which is so curious about this, is that like, I did a lot of research on Harvey Weinstein and why Harvey Weinstein was the way Harvey Weinstein was. He was on every sex worker's list across the United States and world. He didn't want to have sexual intercourse with women who were compliant, who wanted to have sex with him for money, the monetized aspect of it. He wanted the woman who didn't want to have sex with him. So there's a
Well,
shame aspect there of wanting to shame this person and overpower them.
yes, and, I mean, we can also talk about Bill Cosby, but,
Mhm.
my mom she died 8 years ago, and no, 7 years ago, and we used to watch a lot of those Datelines and,
Mhm.
48 Hours and all those true crime mysteries. She really loved those. And we would have the same conversation. About a third of those shows are a man and a woman, and the man has money or they have money, and they're getting divorced, and then, she's gonna take, 5 of his $10 million so he kills her. This is so a third of the shows are that or something. And every time they had one of those shows, my mom and I would have the same conversation, which is, "God, this guy's an idiot." It's like, "Just give her the 5 million. You're now in prison for the rest of your life." And they knew it was you the whole time. You're the only person who had a motive, and it's like,
Mhm.
this is just stupid. And my mom would go, "Derek, you're not understanding the basic psychology. It's not the money, it's that he has to win. And if she takes some of his money, he loses, and he can't lose. And so he wins because A, she forced him to kill her. That's his logic. So he's actually a victim, and he's spending the rest of his life in prison because of that horrible woman
Mhm.
who did this horrible thing to him, never mind that he killed her. And it's the family annihilator stuff too,
Mhm.
that I cannot lose. And it's the same thing here. And this you have brought us to the central point of patriarchy. And I'm really grateful, especially to Leah Keith for this analysis and Andrea Dworkin and Mary Daly. But it's that if I am feeling inferior to you, like we were talking about earlier with the whole sort of woman, be Karen horny stuff,
Mhm.
if I'm feeling inferior to you and I want to feel superior, how do I do that? One of the ways is I violate you.
Mhm.
Because if I violate you, that means I do to you, you don't do to me.
Right.
And when that is my definition of what makes me superior, then I know in my guts that I'm really not superior,
Mhm.
which is why it didn't work for Weinstein to do it just once.
Mhm.
He had to do it again and again because there's this great line by R.D. Lang. How do you plug a void plugging a void? And if you have a void inside and you try to plug it with another void, it goes on forever. And this is the logic of addiction. This is the logic of, if you feel this existential loneliness, and if I can just have sex with that woman, then that'll solve it. But it doesn't solve it. Or if I can just buy this thing,
Mhm.
or if I can win at gambling, or if I can get this woman who doesn't want to say yes to say yes, or if I can cut down this forest, or if I can build this dam. But it's ultimately, I mean, it's that line of why do they climb mountains? Because they're there. It's like
Well,
there's always another mountain.
it's
There's always another
also
woman.
it's
So it's
also
insatiable.
it's
And wait a
also
sec, one more thing. One more thing. This is the end of the world.
Mhm.
This is why Bob Jensen says pornography is the end of the world, because it's insatiable, unfillable. This is why we have to probe the deepest folds of the ocean. This is why we have to bomb the moon,
Mm-hmm.
because we are never satisfied. And there's always another woman for us to conquer. There's always another country for us to conquer. There's always another, it's never good enough. Sorry, go ahead.
But it's also this desire not to want to be the chump.
Yep.
So the reason this man is killing this woman is because he doesn't want to fund her going out and fucking another guy on his dime. And that's the ego that's saying, if I can't have you, no one can. And if no one can, that means I'm not paying for you to go off and live your best life. And I'm sitting here wounded while you're off traveling in the Riviera and doing all this stuff. So it's this, again, it's this toxic need to control someone to the point of absolute destruction. And you're willing to destroy yourself in the process. You don't give a shit.
Well, this is where this entire culture ends. This is why, again, Bob Jensen said pornography is the end of the world, and I agree that that's there can be no end because the void is never filled, and the void would be filled. Oh, so here's another thing: is have you had people on your show before talk about the Society of the Spectacle?
Not in so many
Okay,
words.
great. We'll talk
Yeah.
about it then. It's great.
Yeah.
Okay, this guy Guy Debord wrote about the Society of the Spectacle, which is basically um, how if you're not participating, if you're not engaged in, if you're not in community, then things have to keep getting bigger and bigger. This
Mm.
is why movies have to get bigger and bigger. And I really understood this. God, first we had an unruly penis, and now we're going to have a gay bathhouse in San Francisco. I really understood this. And we already had a sex doll brothel,
That's
so
right.
masturbatorium. So we're covering it
Exactly.
all.
The Holy Trinity.
We're in that
Yeah.
trajectory of upping the ante too. Where are we going to end up?
Yeah, exactly.
Necrophilia?
Well, yes, actually, yes, we can talk about that too.
Okay.
Anyway, the point is that I first understood the Society of the Spectacle when I was reading Randy Schilt's great book, And the Band Played On,
Mm.
which is about the AIDS crisis in the
Mhm.
1980s. And what he's talking about in the band played on is the AIDS crisis is getting worse and worse. It's not just the federal government was the band playing on, but the gay culture
Mhm.
was just playing on when, everybody's saying, "Look, you're dying. Can you please?" And they're like, "We're not going back in the closet. We're gonna fight tooth and nail to keep these bathhouses open." And Randy Schultz was a part of the bathhouse community. He was not writing from the outside, and he died of AIDS.
Mm.
But still, he was a strong critic of, like, what are we doing? Anyway, there's this part in there that changed how I see everything and made me understand the Society of the Spectacle. It's fairly gross, but here we go. So he's in a bathhouse, so he's walking out and he sees some guy sitting in a sling and an amputee rubbing his stump against the guy's behind.
Mhm.
He's like, well, that's weird. And then he suddenly realizes the guy's not an amputee and he's got his arm that far up somebody else's behind.
Mhm.
And he starts asking, what would cause someone to do that? What would cause, and what he came up with, and what I eventually took away from this was beings are immeasurably complex. And a relationship is immeasurably complex. And that's true with a dog, with a bear, with anybody. If you're in relationship with the other, and this is just Martin Buber's I and you, I and thou, um, there can be this complexity. And if you remove relationship from an action, it can get boring. And if you remove the emotional stimulation, the stimulation has to come from somewhere. So it becomes breaking boundaries. It becomes increased physical sensation. So
Mhm.
at one point, it was okay to just go to a baseball park. And then you have to have TVs in front of you. And then you've got to have a jumbotron.
Mhm.
And then you've got to have, and things have to get always bigger and better. And
Mhm.
it's the same, at one point, the Olympics was, just people running around, and then it was bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm not saying this is modern because it's pretty interesting. The richest athlete ever to exist was some guy that was a charioteer back in the Roman days, who his lifetime worth was basically more than all the food given to the Roman army for 5 years in a row. Okay, well, the dogs are very excited and barking. You can't hear it on Zoom, and uh, okay, pups. Okay, it's okay. It's okay. That's because the bear just walked away.
Hey, come back.
Um, anyway, so I don't remember what it was you said that sparked the whole Society of the Spectacle thing, but that's part of it too, is that if you are removing relationship, then the thing has to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and the violation has to get bigger and bigger and bigger.
Transgression.
And this is why violence has to become more and more extreme in movies, why nudity has to become more and more extreme, because what was daring at one point is now boring. And uh and I went through this with swearing. I didn't really swear in high school. And then, once you get past the more intense swear words, where do you go? And um
The context of the swear words. Well, hello, puppy.
um
Yeah, I think it's becoming desensitized
Yeah.
to your environment and being desensitized to people around you. So you stop seeing them as being human anymore. So it's easy to see someone being eviscerated in a movie because that's really not real. And now we've even reduced people. I've heard the term meat suit, which I
Right.
find abhorrent, like calling the human body, which I feel is sacred, a meat suit, is just reducing it down to something that's flimsy and meaningless.
Temporary.
Well, and this is a great chain of being again too, that I have my computer center inside the meat suit, and the meat suit is useless, and the computer center is where it's at. Um,
Right. So we're not seeing frequency, we're not seeing connection that can be more than binary, more than words on a page, like that we're all communicating on a different level, just like we are when we go out into nature, that those blooms are communicating with me. If I slow my roll enough, I'll be able to communicate with my dog, with your dog, with my husband, with the world around me. But if I insulate myself with just being in technology, then the more that I need the technology to keep ramping up the ante, because just seeing puppies is not going to be enough. Like now I need to see something more to get that dopamine spike.
and it's very addictive. It's very addictive, all the way around. A story I was going to tell you earlier is, uh, I don't know, several years ago, uh, I ended up sitting at a dinner table a um, with a world famous actress, and because of the story, I'm not going to say who. Um, but she's often considered on many like top 10 most beautiful women in the world lists. And the reason I bring up the conversation is that when we were at dinner, one of the things that she said to me was that she hates pornography. And one of the reasons she hates it is because she had dated some men who she said, one of the conditions of you dating me is I don't want you to use porn. And they continued. And not only did they continue, but they were enacting some porn stuff onto her, like choking her,
Mhm.
slapping her, and she broke up with them. And so it just it struck me sort of the power of porn, because they are literally in bed with, you know, just ignore the fact that, patriarchal beauty standards, all that. They're in bed with one of the women who's like on the top 10 list of, and there are probably men all over the world who are masturbating thinking about her. but they're actually in bed with her. And she's saying, look, a condition of this is that you don't look at pictures of other naked women. And they couldn't do it.
That's so ridiculous, and it
That-
shows such a lack of sophistication to take your sensual cues from pornography. Like, do you think that
Well,
real women actually enjoy that? Like, that's just mind
so
blowing to me.
and I was telling my sister about that story, and she basically gave me the same look that my mom used to watching Dateline. And she's like, Derek, you don't understand. They don't want to be with a woman. They want to be with someone who can't say no. They want to be with someone, they want to be with the visual image. That's so much easier than a real relationship. So they didn't want a relationship. They wanted the fantasy. That's all they wanted. And that's another of my favorite bits about culture make believe is I talk about how there's a great line by a Canadian lumberman. When I look at trees, I see dollar bills. And if when you look at trees, you see dollar bills, you treat them one way.
Mhm.
And if when you look at trees, you see trees, you treat them another way. And if when you look at this particular tree, you see this particular tree, you treat it differently still. And the same is true for women. That if when I look at women, I see orifices, I'm going to treat them one way. If I see them as resources, I'm going to treat them one way. If I see them as women, I'm going to treat them another way. And if I see this particular woman as this particular woman, I'll treat her differently still. And that's, I think, incredibly important. You know, we see the entire world as resources, and men collectively see women as resources. Uh, right now, I'm working on a screenplay that has to do with some Boko, and Boko Haram has kidnapped girls. And one of the things they'll sell them, and they'll also trade them for one girl is worth a case of AK-47s. And so a line that came to me, maybe Lear wrote, I don't know. Either it came to me or I stole it, one or the other, um, was women and girls are among the oldest currency in the world. And it's just, and that's one way to look at women. I think it's a terribly destructive way. Um, And by the way, this is I also wrote about this in Culture Make Believe that for whatever reason, porn had never been part of my life. I didn't use it in high school or college or thereafter. And then when I was writing that book, um, a friend of mine told me about her sister and her sister's husband who would sit in opposite corners of a room on chat rooms back in the 90s and sext with other people. And so they're typing with one hand and masturbating with the other. When they have a person in the same room, it's like, how did that happen? So for about 2 months, I was doing research. Like if I'm going to write about porn, I need to write about it. Just like I need
Mhm.
to read about it. I need to look at it. Just like when I write about child labor, I need to read child labor stuff.
Mhm.
Anyway, so I started looking at it and I quit. Because I had learned enough and I was, and also I quit because I still remember this day. I was walking across a college campus to the library, and a woman came the other way. We met eyes, smiled, nodded, did the thing where you just, pass by with like a normal human thing. And the instant thought I had, which I'd never had before, was what colors are pubic hair? And it's like, honestly, my fantasy life about women up until that moment was basically if I see somebody I was attracted to, be like, what would it be like to have a great conversation with her? You know? And I realized that if only a 4 week, 6 weeks, 8 week uh, use of porn could affect something so spontaneous and so instant and so intimate as my spontaneous fantasy, like, how does that affect us when we're immersed in it as an entire culture? It scared the hell out of me. And it's like, okay, I'm done. And that's it. I don't ever need to look at this again. It's already wrecked whatever damage it's gonna do. And it took a while for my spontaneous fantasy life to go back to, oh, what would it be like to blow up a dam with her? Um,
Well, and so much of this is about uh, the messaging that we are giving to both men and women, and I think that's what is so startling about the trans ideology is that the messaging is that being a woman is a costume. And all you have to do is have these certain elements of the costume, and then you are a woman. So we've defined and distilled women down to breasts and fake hair and fake butts and this very kind of vapid personality. And so you see that as being kind of the archetypical version of women. And what I've always said is you never see a man dressed like B. Arthur. Like you don't see Maude. It's always the Kim Kardashian version of a woman. And it's so insulting because the messaging that women have is in order to be a woman, in order to be feminine, you have to fit this very specific criteria. So you have to have the ability to have a baby, but you certainly don't want to look like you've had a baby, and you certainly don't want to act like an adult woman. You want to act like a baby. So it's kind of infantilizing women to this state where they are the least powerful, and then giving men agency to wear that costume and to be that costume. And we're all just keeping, like, we're just basically closing our eyes to that and going, sure, you're a woman.
I love this meme that I came across. It's not your typical meme, but it's a quote by Jen Isaacson. I don't know who that is, but the fact that society believes a man who says he's a woman instead of a woman who says he's not is proof that society knows exactly who is the man and who is the woman. Like, that's fucking amazing.
I I don't understand. One of the things that kills me, we can have all this conversation about the trans issue, and I can say, we have to tell lies to each other in order to maintain this way of living, but it's still just the rank stupidity of this issue blows me away. It's like I love the line. Is it J.K. Rowling who said the thing about there are two types of people in the world, about the tickle versus giggle? There are two types of people in the world. There are those who know that this is not a woman, and there are those who, for whatever reason, will pretend this is a woman. It's like everybody knows. And whenever I get into some argument with somebody, it's like every single human who has ever been born is a result of a male sperm and a female egg.
Mm-hmm.
And there's there's infants imprint on women's faces. Infants like women's faces more than men's faces instinctively. It's
Mm-hmm.
like we all we all know. And high jumping just kills me. That was my sport. And I was, like I said, I was a conference champion, but I went to small college conference, and uh, I set the school record 6 feet 10 inches. But that's great. That's great for a small school. I did not qualify even for Division II nationals. So I was a really good jumper, but I was not a great jumper.
Mm-hmm.
But women, had I identified as a woman and they would have allowed this back then, I would have held the women's world record up until very recently. And I would still be considered one of the I would probably be considered the best jumper who ever lived. It's huge, the difference. My female jumper who won national champion, she wouldn't have made opening height. She wouldn't have made opening height for the men. It's just like these boys who are coming in first and second and third,
Mm-hmm.
the ones in high jumping, because I know that sport, they stink. There's that line about women's sports is not for mediocre male athletes.
Mm-hmm.
They're not even mediocre. Like the boys who are winning the girls' high jumping would not make opening height for the men's. Am I being clear on what that means? Opening height is like they would be 4 inches below where the boys start. And this is just it's pathetic. It's I don't this whole issue, and I don't understand. We talked before we went on that my career is pretty much destroyed because of the trans issue and because I spoke out against queer theory, which we haven't really talked about yet.
Yes.
Um, and it blows me away that, and I'm not the only person. There's a lot of people who've lost their careers because they won't say men can be women. It's just, why don't we say that potatoes can be cranberries? It's like, eh, these are category differences. This is not like, nobody's saying that you can't be, quote, an effeminate man. Nobody's saying that you can't dress like Liberace or Elton John or, I mean, I love Mr. Meno, and like, he's just, I think he would be fine with that. He's as gay as you can get, he's stereotypical. And he's great. I love Mr. Meno. And I but he's not a woman. It's like, Liberace was not a woman. And, um, being the being the being a woman is not about being penetrated, as Andrea Long Chu, with a woman as an expectant asshole. That not only is it stupid, it's also really insulting. This whole thing. My voice gets thin and reedy when I talk about it because I can't. I don't have a lot of faith. One of my favorite jokes in any book that I ever wrote was that when they were classifying the different species, the sort of Linnaeus classifying system of, Epilobium angustifolium or whatever for the different species. And when they called us Homo sapiens sapiens, they added the second sapiens to make sure we got the joke. Um, I don't think we're very smart. We like to pretend we are, but this is really stupid.
It is.
I can't. Okay, and like sports, even if you want to, there's another of my favorite lines by Artie Lang is children are not yet stupid, but we shall turn them into imbeciles like ourselves with high IQs if possible. And that's what I think of so much academia. Or there's a great line by, I think it's Lao Tzu. Um, maybe it's not. It's some ancient Chinese. I think it's Lao Tzu. Um, the more talking and thinking, the farther from the truth. And I believe that Lao Tzu did not mean that in an anti-intellectualism sort of way, but in a way that it's really easy for us to uh, talk ourselves into all sorts of stupidity.
Bullshit ourselves. Yes, exactly. And talk others
In
into
fact, I
it.
think that that's one of I think, and I'm not being cynical when I say this, unless I'm just so cynical I don't even know I'm cynical anymore. But I think one of the primary uses of our intelligence is to rationalize whatever it is we wanted to do in the first place.
Hmm.
I think we're really good at that. I'm pretty good at it, frankly. Um,
I see two things here. One, it seems that it's a denial of the mother, this hatred of the mother that you are creating kind of this antithetical version of what you believe a woman is. So you create this costume that's basically like dressing like a stripper. Like, that's what all of these women look like, is that they're prostitutes or strippers, the people that identify as trans. And I find that very fascinating in and of itself. But it also seems like there's this need to justify your salary in academia. So you're kind of you're exploring and you're doing research. Like Gail Rubin wrote The Thinking Sex. And it's like, we're just trying to kind of throw anything against the wall and see what sticks. See what I can get people what flag I can get people to carry. And it's not really like, she wouldn't have had a career if she said, well, we figured everything out. We're kind of done. We don't really need to have these discussions anymore. We know men are men and women are women. So it's pushing a boundary that almost becomes pathological.
well, you do also know that she's a sadomasochist. And
That makes sense.
Yeah, and violating boundaries is part of what that's all about. I mean, the whole point of queer theory is to violate boundaries. I mean, by definition, that's by their own definition. Um,
Abolishment of
and
norms.
I mean, do we want to talk about queer theory
Sure.
I
I
mean,
mean,
yeah, I mean, an hour and a half in, sure, because I feel like it could be its own 2-hour show, but I mean, yeah, better late than never.
Definitely.
Yeah.
um, so let's back up a second and start with postmodernism, because queer theory is a subset of that. Postmodernism asks a really smart question. See, then again, this makes me question whether we are, in fact, intelligent at all, because it asks a great question, which is how do we know what's true?
Mhm.
You know, there's lots of stories. You know, you have your version of something, I have my version. And, you know, every parent, I've never been a parent, but every parent who's ever existed or babysitter has ever existed has had to deal with a lamp breaks and little Jimmy says it's Janie's fault and Janie says it's Jimmy's fault. This is what a court is about. Prosecutor says that guy's guilty. Defense attorney says, no, he's not guilty. And it's the judge and jury's job to figure out what is true,
Mhm.
what is reality, what's going on. So when you have all these conflicting stories, how do you tell what's true? Postmodern asks that question. It's like with history, you know, was the book I just read on the Psalm. You know, we always hear that the Psalm was a failure of tactics and a failure of strategy and a tremendous waste. And this guy, I'm not taking a side on this one. This guy's argument was that it was an important part of a battle of attrition against the Germans. That yeah, a lot of British soldiers died, but a lot of German soldiers died, and the Allies could afford it more than the Central Powers could. That's his argument. So that's what people do. We argue. This
Mhm.
is, and I think that's what bluebirds do too. I think birds spend half their time squabbling, you know? Bats, they've actually recorded bats. Like they put a video that could see in the dark, evidently, and audio on a bat colony over the winter. And then they were able, by putting together what the bat's actions were with what they had said just before it, they figured out most of what they're doing is squabbling. Like, you're too close, move away, get out of here. Oh, come over here close. It's like, no, 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 yeah, I think being squabble.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Anyway,
sure.
um, so how do you know what's true? That's what postmodernism asks, and it comes up with the stupidest possible answer, which is there is no truth.
Yep. All
There's
subjective.
nothing real.
Yeah.
It's just the stories we tell.
Mhm.
That's just crazy. You have your perspective. I have my perspective. They're not going to be the same, but there is a physical reality from which we both saw our own blurry versions of it. You
Yes.
know,
Mhm.
it's like that's the simple answer, which would not make the academics money. Um,
Exactly.
anyway, so the postmodernists came up with this. There's nothing but stories. It's all stories. Okay, fine. So then queer theory asks another really good question, which is why are some acts considered normal and some considered not normal, especially having to do with sex? Actually, that's kind of a stupid question because normal is the wrong word, even though that's the word they use. Um, normal, I mean, heterosexuality should be what's normal if you use normal in a value neutral sense, because that's how we reproduce.
Yeah.
Mhm.
That doesn't mean that the other's bad. That's really what they're getting at
Yes.
is why do we consider some bad and some not? But they talk about normal and not normal, which is, like I said, complete being right-handed is normal. I'm left-handed. That's not bad, but it is simply true. Anyway, so they ask, why are some sex acts considered inappropriate or or prohibited or frowned upon? Which I think is a really good question. You know, the fact that sexual reproduction happens heterosexually
Mhm.
is fine, but why can't two guys have sex? Why can't two women have it? It was like, why is there a stricture against it? Great question. But again, they answer it in the stupidest way possible, which is that because the strictures against homosexuality are wrong, therefore all strictures against all forms of sexuality are wrong. This is just stupid. This is again, that doesn't follow.
Mm-mm.
What we need to do is we need to have social conversations about what forms we personally and collectively find morally acceptable. And, you know, my book Endgame is really, I sometimes got called the violence guy because, and I didn't like it at all, because I was attempting to have a sophisticated conversation about violence. Because, like, I had a conversation with a pacifist once where she said that she would never commit any act of violence. And I said, interesting. How do you defecate? Because every time you poop, you're killing a whole bunch of bacteria.
Mm-hmm.
And that may not seem like violence to you, but it sure does to those bacteria. The anaerobic bacteria are now going to die.
Mm-hmm.
And so the way I like to have conversations about violence, and we can have the same thing about sex, anything really, is okay, most of the time would find it okay, first off, let's define violence because our definitions of violence are just so vague as to be useless.
Mm-hmm.
But I like defining violence as an act, is any act that harms another. And I like that because it uh, shows the ubiquity of violence, shows that violence is everywhere. And so I like to say, what? I'm sorry? Yeah. And then we could talk about, yeah, well, we could talk about emotional, we could we could have discussions about that because I think that an I think that a man saying to a woman, you have to take your clothes off or I'm going to beat the shit out of you. Is that yet? No, I don't think that. I think you're right. That's not yet violence, but that is
It's close.
terrorism. He's terrorizing her into
Yeah.
acting.
Mm-hmm.
So if we're going to be precise, sure, let's go with that. A physical act, but that also means we can have acts of terrorism that imply that there will be violence.
Mm-hmm.
Threats.
Separate those.
Mhm.
Okay, which is great. So what I say is that most of us, most of the time, find it personally and socially acceptable to do an act of violence to a carrot.
Right.
When you
Fair
eat a
enough.
carrot, you're killing it. And most of us, most of the time, find that, and that's great. I mean, carrot might disagree, but this, by the way, is why I'm a terrible gardener because every time I pull a weed, this is what I'm thinking. And, what this means is I'm a terrible gardener. It, it's just, I'm not making a moral statement by anybody else. Anyway, most of us, most of the time, would find it morally unacceptable to do an act of violence to a human being. Most of us, most of the time. If one of you right now, for no reason, socked the other, I would be offended. And I would presume the other person would too. And yet, not all the time. I actually don't have a problem with the state having killed Ted Bundy.
Right.
So, and that's a discussion we can have. You can disagree. Leo and I have been having disagreements about the death penalty for 15 years, and it's great. We're very happy to have a disagreement.
But doesn't
And
consent fall in here as well? Because you could argue that the carrot has put itself in your path and the carrot is consenting to be killed because you grew it in your garden and the relationship that you have agreed upon is that you're going to pull it out of the ground and you're going to eat that carrot, right?
so
Where's the agreement?
one can make that. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
I'm just wondering what the agreement was between the carrot and the human.
There's some karmic consent that has happened. Like, I'm planting this seed, so now you and I have created this relationship where you are going to feed me because that's your role in this dynamic.
So I think that leads to incredibly sophisticated and productive conversations. I was first introduced to that with Barry Lopez in his book of Wolves and Men when he talks about a conversation of death between predator and prey that happens sometimes.
Right.
And uh, I've actually, so I thought I was participating in that. And when I was raising chickens, I thought that sometimes they gave themselves to me. I don't know if it's true. Maybe I'm projecting. Um, I definitely perceived that one time. It couldn't have been anything else. Where I'm sitting by a pond with 3 dogs and 2 cats. There's all 6 of us are like sitting there in a big pile. And this rat comes walking up to us in the middle of the day, and the dogs start to chase it. And I say to the dog, "Stop," and that makes them hesitate just long enough that the rat jumps into the pond, swims across. When it gets to the other side, I could see then that it could barely walk. And all of a sudden I was like, wow, if you were a rat, why would you walk up to 3 dogs, a human, and 2
Yeah,
cats?
exactly.
Because you're ready to die.
Mhm.
And then basically and then the rat had broken nerve at the last second because of course you are with these 3, these 3
Mhm.
big creatures coming at you. But yes, so I don't disagree with what you're saying. And in fact, Richard Manning and Lear would argue that grains have controlled human behavior and they've spread all over the world. And part of the deal is that we get to eat some of them, but we propagated them everywhere. And in
Mhm.
fact, we've made our lives based on them.
Mhm.
And so I'm not disagreeing with you at all. I think that's a, and I think that's, uh, and for the purposes of this discussion, let's just stay with it's an act of violence against the carrot
Right.
and,
Okay.
and whether there's consent or not, because I was just trying to make the point that we have violence that we should have those questions. Like we obviously don't consider it an act of a morally unacceptable act of violence to wipe the fish out of the oceans. We collectively don't seem to mind that. We don't collectively seem to mind deforesting most of the planet. So there are like you see somebody plowing a field, most of us don't go, "Oh my God, that's an act of genocide against the bacteria."
Mhm.
Most of us don't find. So my point is I think it's really important to have those conversations about everything. And we should have those conversations about like what forms of sex do we find it acceptable for people to have, for 2 adults to have in the privacy of their own bedroom. Do I really care? And I kind of do, actually. It ends up. Um, and I'll tell you a story about that. That the point, the back to queer theory, is that queer theory asks the question, why are some acceptable and not acceptable? Great question. I think should be full of public debate. And they answer the question that all forms are acceptable and that any stricture against any form of sexuality is oppressive, which includes down to infants. I mean, Michel Foucault, the godfather of queer theory, argued for eradicating the age of consent, as in down to infants. He was going to Tunisia and raping young boys in a cemetery. How much more necrophiliac can you get than that? And uh, Gail Rubin, about 50% of her founding document of queer theory is a defense of pedophilia. And we can do some actual quotes if you want. Um, the okay, well, we'll do that.
Yeah, yeah. Some
So
receipts.
that circles back to my question about consent because an infant cannot give consent. A child cannot give consent. So for me, that throws that right out of the water. Like, yes, if you want to have intercourse with another man and you consider yourself a homosexual, then if you have received consent or you've given consent, then that's your business. But you can't do that with an animal. An animal cannot consent to having sex.
Well, if an animal can't consent to having sex, then why can a carrot consent to being killed?
I
Good
don't
point.
know.
Good point. Yeah.
I don't know.
Maybe there's a karmic
It,
agreement there
and,
too.
but by the way, I'm not arguing that animals can to have sex. I'm not arguing that at all. So the quote by Gail Rubin about pedophilia, and this was in document of queer theory. Uh, like communists and homosexuals in the 1950s, boy lovers are so stigmatized that it's difficult to find defenders for their civil liberties, let alone their erotic orientation. Um, and that's the founding document of queer theory. Queer theory, from the beginning, since they argue that everything normal is bad
Mhm.
and violating norms is inherently good, they cannot functionally oppose pedophilia. Because as soon as they oppose pedophilia, they've ruined the whole background, the whole basis of their theory, which is all norms are bad. And they've entered into a reasonable discussion of what isn't bad. So we have uh, Judith Butler actually argues that we should the dog's barking because I was sitting here thinking, and as I did, I sort of pounded on the table like this. I drummed on the table. So now the dogs are crazy.
Is there a bear out there?
Anticipatory bear is what I call
Yes.
it.
Exactly.
Uh, so Judith Butler argued that we must, quote, rethink, end quote, the prohibition against parent-child incest, because she says that that can form a basis of oppression. And the problem, the way they basically argue it, is the problem is not the adult raping the child. They would object to the word raping. The problem is not the adult raping the child. The problem is the social stigma associated with it. So if you just remove the social stigma, it won't cause any problems, which is horrific, I think.
Incest
I want to
shaming.
I'm sorry, what?
Incest shaming.
Yeah, and I think we need to bring back shame about many things.
I do too.
Um, so I wanna go back to 2 things. One of them is the consent notion, because I actually object to the consent notion in sex, and my objection to it is that when I looked up consent, in a dictionary, the example it gave was, someone consenting to a search by a detective,
Mhm.
and I don't know about you or anybody else, but I don't want to have sex with somebody who has the same level of enthusiasm as I would have for a detective searching my home. So consent can be, uh, remember early on we said that the purpose of abuse is to one of the purposes of abuse is to create consenting victims.
Mhm.
And part of the problem is that we have an entire culture suffering from complex PTSD through child rearing practices and everything else, and we can
Mhm.
discuss that for another 2 hours sometime. But so we have adults who are playing out their childhood trauma and consenting to re-traumatization essentially.
Totally.
Yep.
And I wanna there's this excuse me, this incident I remember from the 80s that I think about not infrequently, where I was driving across Wyoming in the middle of the night. Remember how the AM radio used to bounce off the stratosphere? And so you're in Wyoming and you suddenly get a station out of Guadalajara or something. So I'm driving across the country and I suddenly hear this talk show of this guy, Dr. Harvey Rubin, who was a psychologist. And this woman asks this question that is, so uh, I was dating this guy and we broke up because he wanted me to dominate him during sex, and I didn't really feel comfortable with that, so we broke up. And then I saw him the other day walking down the street, and I like him, he's a fine guy. We broke up amicably, but so I said, "How you doing?" And he said, "I'm doing great because I found somebody who will dominate me sexually, and so we are so happy." And she said, "I'm just wondering, what do you think about that?" And he said, um I don't think that complementary sexual neuroses are a sound basis for a relationship. And if he were to say that today, he would be fired. She would be hounded out of her job for asking the question.
Mhm.
And the person who would be valorized in this whole story is the guy for living his truth.
Mhm.
And I think the question we need to ask about pornography, about prostitution, about the trans issue, about anything having to do with sex, anything having to do with anything, capital punishment, is what does this do for society as a whole? So that's where I used to be like, anything two people do in their bedroom is none of my business. And it still is none of my business. But that doesn't alter the fact that, and I didn't make this up. There was, you know who said this? Ah, uh, Arthur Evans. the guy who wrote Witchcraft and the Gay Counterculture. He said, I got to find the exact quote. I love this quote. Um, I need to know how to spell Arthur though. Arthur, Arthur Evans. Uh, okay, so I'm going to read this. Pat Califia was another early queer theorist, and she was infamous for a bunch of things, writing child torture porn, etc., but for having carved a swastika into a bound Jewish lover's slash victim's arm during sex. Califia's defense was that the swastika wasn't carved into the woman's skin, but rather scratched. Never mind that the woman required medical attention. The real point, as the powerful gay activist and author Arthur Evans put it, what kind of person gets off by scratching swastikas on a woman's skin? Evans wrote about one reason he thought BDSM was harmful. I love this quote. Quote, we also have to reflect on the implications of what we do, both for ourselves and for society at large. We have to do so for sex and for every other aspect of our lives. That's what it means to be a mature human being. We have to reflect on the implications of what we do, both for ourselves and for society at large. We have to so for sex and for every other aspect of our lives. That's what it means to be a mature human being. I love that. It's like, you doing this podcast, I think that you have to reflect on what it does both for you and for society at large.
For sure.
Mhm.
And when you drive a car, you have to reflect on, I mean, obviously you can't do this every time you every time you walk down the street. This is the Martin Buber I and thou stuff that we want to enter into IU relationships. That's what makes relationships, but you can't do it every moment of every day. I can't go into Walmart, walk through, and wonder if the checker has hemorrhoids. It's like I can't ask who has a life. I can't think that, every being, I can't be thinking about every being. We just explode into, it's the same. You can't be thinking every time you defecate, oh my God, we have to say a prayer for every bacteria. It's like that you would never do anything.
Mhm.
And so, but in general, we need to ask these questions. And that's the question that queer theory should be asking is what are the implications for society? I mean, again, I got no uh I and for what it's worth, everybody always says is like literally my oldest friend in the world is gay. It's like we've been friends for long. It's like, and I have to say this, it was so nice. He came out to me. So we've been friends since I was 16, he was 17, something like that. And he came out to me in my mid-20s, and he did so by sending me a book that was a gay coming of age piece by one of his favorite writers.
Hmm.
And he, in the letter, this has meant more to me than almost anything else anybody's ever written to me. In the letter, he said, uh, "So I guess you'll figure out from this I'm gay, and I never told you at first because I was afraid it would hurt our friendship, and then I never told you later because I knew it didn't matter." And that's just true. But that doesn't alter the fact that we need to ask what it does for society to have drag queen story out. We have to ask, and maybe we come to the conclusion collectively that it's okay. I don't believe so, but maybe collectively we do. But we need to have that conversation. Is it okay? Is it okay? I mean, I know, frankly, I'm going to stop going into this territory because I'm not gay, but I know plenty of gays and lesbians who can't stand pride, and they're like, I say, "Why?" And they're like assless chaps.
Yeah, it's become kink fest.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and and I think, if you want to make the argument that BDSM is good for society, that's fine. Make the argument, but don't do a no debate on it. Don't try to uh, destroy the career of anybody who disagrees with it. Don't. Uh, yeah, I mean that's a discussion we need to have then, and make the argument. If you really believe that a male who believes he's a woman actually is a woman, make the argument and make it and make it, extraordinary claims require extraordinary proof.
And don't use the
Um,
word feeling in your description.
oh, here's the thing. One of the things that, yeah, I completely agree. And one of the things that really bugs me about the whole trans issue, and I, like many of the radical feminists, was asking this question way before Matt Walsh did. One of the things that really, I mean, I never was pro trans, but I was like, I didn't think about it much for a long time. And one of the things that really hit me was this one woman just asking, "What is a woman?" This is probably 2010 or 9 or something on some discussion forum. And
Mhm.
everybody's like, "You filthy bigot, we're gonna rape you with a chainsaw. We're gonna," it's like, I mean, if I ask, "What is a turnip?" You're not gonna get mad at me. It's like, it's a and if you're going to, and it killed me when, Supreme Court nominee, Jackson, was like, she couldn't answer the question.
Mhm.
And this kills me because law is about definitions. That's
Mhm.
all law is. Like if I get a parking ticket and the county or city has not defined what is a no parking zone, they can't give me a ticket.
Mhm.
Exactly.
And if you say this person committed first degree murder, and then you look in the law and there's no definition of first degree murder, I get walk or something. It's like it's just crazy. So for her, if they would have asked her any question, what is such and such? What is a statute of limitations?
Mhm.
And she would have given that mealy mouth answer, I would have voted against her. I don't care what the politics are.
Mhm.
If they would, like I said, I support the death penalty, Leah doesn't. If they would have said, what, if somebody would have asked, define what is the death penalty? And she would have said, I can't answer that question. It's like, then what are you doing being a judge?
Well,
It's just,
I
th-
would swing
go
it
ahead.
back when you're talking about BDSM, I would swing that back to the doll discussion because one of the things that I found in my research was that some therapists were saying, well, we should give pedophiles dolls so they can have sex with the dolls as opposed to going and kidnapping children and having sex with a real animate child. And what I would posit is that at that stage is just a rehearsal. So it's kind of the same thing about BDSM. You may feel like you have agency in that dynamic in the moment, but what you're doing is you're rehearsing violent acts with someone in under the confines of being safe in a safe place. Well, when is that not going to be enough? When are you going to need to raise the ante and then maybe go and kidnap someone and play out that same fantasy that you had in the dungeon?
Um, that makes sense. And um, I would also, I would add that if, um, that we should ask therapeutically whether repeating the trauma is is actually in fact therapeutically beneficial, or if it's
Exactly.
reinforcing
Yep.
uh prior uh prior wounding,
Mhm.
and whether uh I would ask, I would ask, um I guess if I were someone's therapist and they asked me, I would ask, um what is it that you think you're accomplishing through that? What is why why do you think that you're attracted to that particular thing?
Well,
And
with phobias, what they're doing is what's called exposure therapy. And so, if you're afraid of spiders, then I'm going to bring a spider. I'm going to show you a picture of a spider first, and you'll get used to that, and you'll have the emotional reaction. Then we'll actually put you in the room with the spider, and then we'll actually have you touch the spider. And the idea is that you become less and less sensitized to the reaction of that phobia, and that is where the healing happens in when you're talking about pedophilia, uh, again, some of the lure is the resistance that the child has to the act. So it's not going to be satisfied using a doll unless the doll has a tape that is screaming and crying, and you're playing that while you're actually doing enacting the abuse.
So everything you say makes sense. And again, I would sort of add that um, the orgasm is one of the most powerful uh, reinforcers
Mm-hmm.
that we have. And that's one of the geniuses of patriarchy is that it has combined domination with the orgasm
Mm-hmm.
and made a multiplicative or exponential effect.
Mm-hmm.
And so I would say that there's a difference between the spider phobia therapy and reinforcing. This is how men, there are men who can only have an orgasm through porn and not with real women anymore because
Exactly.
they've reinforced it
Mm-hmm.
through porn. And I remember reading maybe 15, 20 years ago, I read a sex manual. And I think the whole concept is kind of funny because it's not like adjusting your carburetor, I mean, what it's like technique is like, yeah, it'd be nice if she came into the room doing a round off back handspring, back flip, but it's like, I'm not going to go, that was a 10, except you didn't stick the landing. So it's just, the whole thing is just, it's not, sex is about relationship.
Mm-hmm.
And it's, anyway, in this sex therapy book, there were not sex manual book, it had instructions for how to get for how it was written by a woman and about women. Um, and one of the instructions was how for the woman to get herself to do an inherently painful sex act. And it's that she stimulates herself to the point of orgasm right before the painful thing happens. And then she has an orgasm as the painful thing is happening. And then she's going to come to associate that painful thing with orgasm.
Mm-hmm.
And when I read that, I'm like, that's the wrong approach.
Yeah.
And that's just completely the wrong approach. And so the point is that this is one of the problems is that if you were trained into something as a child, Foucault was horribly abused as a kid.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't know if we want to blame it on the abuse because he might also have been just cracked from when he was born.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if especially the recipient of the painful sex is is acting out a childhood trauma, they are actually reinforcing it with orgasm,
Totally.
with oxytocin, with everything else at this point. And I think that that's just a bad idea.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Absolutely. And that's why there's so much shame associated, especially for young men who have been sexually abused, because the body responds in a way that seems that like they are experiencing pleasure, but that's just an innate physical response that the body has. And then
You're the
the abuser will say, well, you liked it, you
Yep.
enjoyed it. And that again reinforces the shame of having sexual pleasure when they were abused.
Judith Herman wrote about a woman that one of the worst things that happened was she had an orgasm during the rape, and she felt she felt that her own body
Had
had violated her
betrayed.
to them.
Sure.
Well,
But it was a purely physiological response to, whatever was happening.
Stimulation. Yeah, exactly.
Um, well, that seems like a terrible note to end on. So let's end on what's a final question to end on for today?
oh, geez. Let's see if I have something that's relatively lighthearted compared to that. God, there's nothing simple that I have on here except about you and what you have coming up, what you're working on, and where people can find you. But that's not really a topic, but that's more information. Okay, what do
Well,
you
we need
think
to.
of what do you think about the recent Scottish Court of Session ruling removing trans women from women's prisons? Did you hear about that? Yeah.
Yeah. Um, I don't know. This is the same as everything else. I don't understand how it came to be in the first place. It's
Mhm.
just
Mhm.
this is uh, it is a crime. It's against the Geneva Convention to house male prisoners with females. It's just, and the whole stupidity of just a man saying he's a woman and therefore he is. It's just, I don't, and and also, I'm gonna say this, and nobody gets to say this anymore, but it was recognized not that long ago that cross-dressing paraphilia was potentially a sign of a serial killer. It's like if you look, we have Ed Gein, we
Mhm.
have, BTK killer, uh, possibly Ted Bundy. There's some confusion about that. It's like, and those are just 3 that come to top off the top of my head. Albert Fish, I think, I'm pretty sure.
Yes,
Um,
Henry, Portrait of a Serial Killer, his partner was
Mhm.
also a
What
cross-dresser.
was his name?
O'Toole?
Yes,
I bet he didn't
Otis Elwood Toole.
he didn't pass.
Um, oh, that's another thing about I'm so glad you said passing, because even the notion of passing is Peter Board in the Society of Spectacle. One of the things he talked about is how simulations, when a simulation becomes reality. And so there's this really ridiculous notion that if you simulate a woman, or as you said, a pornified woman, then you're a woman. But a simulation is not a thing. You know, I can play, uh, uh, okay, I can play Left 4 Dead 2, which is a computer game where you shoot zombies. I am not actually shooting zombies. I am not actually doing anything but sitting on my ass and moving a couple fingers. It's like, this is not. I had a friend who was playing computer games, and I would say, "What are you gonna go do?" And he said, "I'm gonna go kill some pixels." And it's just, we can have another conversation about another thing that I think is added to the trans thing is, that our simulations have become increasingly realistic.
Mhm.
And,
The Uncanny
this
Valley.
is not a
Yeah.
primary thing, but it's part of it where you get photographs, and then you get moving photographs, and then you look at special effects from the 1960s, you know, Sinbad,
Mhm.
and they're just ridiculous, and now you get pretty effective, and I think, I don't know, there's interesting discussions we can have about that, but the whole passing thing is just ridiculous. Who cares? I mean, it doesn't matter if you quote pass or not. In that, you're still not the thing.
Yes.
I can put I
That's
can
deception.
yeah, it's how well do you deceive?
Mhm.
But then your question was, what was your question? Oh, it's Scottish. I don't know how they got in the first place. And it's just, maybe the world is peaking. Maybe this whole thing is starting to recede. Some sanity is starting to come back. And honestly, I think, I mean, the sanity is well deserved. And I think that uh, trans activists in general, it's very clear that this has been pushed by a neurosis because they're they have way overplayed their hand at every step, and they have not been tactical, and they've not been smart.
Mhm.
And so here's the thing: so somebody uh, who was doing a group for domestic violence perpetrators, for men who batter women,
Mhm.
batterers, doing a domestic, like a group session where they were all required to come in.
Mhm.
And one day, the person thought that, I don't know if it was he or she, whoever was running the group, they decided they would ask, um, so do you beat a woman right away, or is there no value judgment? I'm just asking, is there an optimum amount of time you wait before you first beat her? And the perps were all had a lively conversation where it's like, "No, of course you don't beat her on the first date. That'd be ridiculous. You have to hook her first." And, like, my mom, the first time she got beaten was after the marriage when she was pregnant,
Mhm.
Oh,
and, you
perfect.
know, she's hooked.
Yep.
You got her on the line, and they agreed that the amount of time you wanna wait is about a year, because then she's invested enough, she's not gonna just walk away. I mean, first date, for God's sake, you know? She's gonna just quit immediately. Anyway, so you wait about a year. And the point here having to do with the trans activists is that they did not have the patience to make sure that the hook was set in society at large. And pushing men and women's sports, pushing men and women's prisons. I mean, the whole thing is ridiculous, but if I were their strategic advisor and I really wanted to push their thing, I would have suggested they go much slower. I think that the thing they have done in schools is brilliant. Horrific, awful, an atrocity, but you wanna get the kids, and they've done a brilliant job of that, um, but I think you do that through books like they have. You don't do it through Drag Queen Story Hour because that's just it's bad optics, and I think the whole men and women's prison has been and of course, they've fought it being public, but, I mean, for God's sake, you have literal serial sex killers in women's prisons. Like, I mean, Donna Perry, for God's sake. Um,
There's
And the
uh,
curiosity is not wanting your own space. Because the true solution to all of this is creating trans spaces. But then that does not fulfill the patriarchy then. Because what this is about is an absolute capture and a takeover of women. It's not about trans activism because they could say, we want a third bathroom. We want our own sports. We want our own ... But it's not
they
about
never
that.
want that.
It's
wanna be
it's
you.
it's a destruction of the woman.
they
It's
wanna
a
be you.
yes, completely. It's a destruction of the woman. It is also they require public validation of their fetish.
Totally.
That it's all about forcing me to submit to their that's they get off on me and you and everybody else affirming them. They they don't want for me to just say, you can be in a third space. It has to be that we all uh bow the knee. And it's all about domination.
It goes straight back to the Weinstein thing.
Yep.
Weinstein didn't
Yep.
want complicit women. He wanted
Yep.
women that he could overpower, that he had some leverage over, and that he could utilize that leverage.
Completely agree with you. And of course, Bill Cosby the same. It just blows me away that presuming that Bill Cosby was in the same position as many rock stars, he presumably had groupies lining up outside his
Totally.
room.
Exactly.
And even some of those women said, I would have had sex with him. He didn't have to drug me.
And but that's not it. That's not what really got him off. What got him off was the power. We always have to keep we always have to remember. See, that's really interesting. So I read in my 20s, and I was really interested in like what's the difference between why am I platonic friends with this woman and and this woman's a girlfriend and
Mhm.
how like I was really interested in the difference. So I was very disappointed when Harry Met Sally came out because I thought it was gonna be a serious discussion of that and it ended up being a romantic comedy. It's like
Mhm.
I don't know what I was expecting. Anyway, I was very disappointed when I read Foucault and his history of sex or whatever it is, because
Mhm.
it's like he got a little bit of it. I think the main thing I took from his whole the one about Greece was that I thought it was really interesting that the men and boys they played out a lot of the same power dynamics that men and women do
Mhm.
in terms of if you put out too quickly, you're a slut, and if you
Mhm.
wait too long, you're a tease. And what I thought was interesting is, wow, this is how power plays out in a patriarchy in sexual relationships. And then, of course, Foucault got an entirely different thing that this is what relationships are like. It's like I was so disappointed because well, I would like to say he got it halfway, but that's just not true. What he was doing is creating a toxic mimic of the real
Mhm.
analysis. Um,
And it's also taking out the pregnancy aspect. If you're
all
having
right.
sex with a young boy, then you don't have to worry about that young boy becoming pregnant. So that's the excuse, basically, of why you're educating men with younger men.
Right. Well, yeah, which I'm glad you used the word excuse with heavy sarcasm. Um, um, anyway, so no, I think it's great that they're pulling the men out of the women's prisons, and it's way too late for all the women who've already been sexually assaulted.
Yeah, exactly.
And uh, I want to say better late than never, but that doesn't cover. I mean, there should be huge lawsuits about this.
So they may be in the future.
This has just been a travesty.
Yeah.
It's been absolutely horrible,
Yes.
um, inexcusable, and never mind the fact that what is it? I don't know what's the percentage, 60% or something of the males who identify as trans who are in prison or in for sex offenses?
Yeah,
Yes.
It's a huge
exactly.
percent,
Then there
and
have been cases where the couple that was involved in that, both of them are in the same prison, which is
yep,
insane. It's fucking insane.
yeah, and the women who complain, of course, get in trouble. I don't
Yeah.
understand how the guards put up with it. I don't understand how the guards are basically good Germans. It, like I was saying about the coaching thing, if I were a guard of the prison, I would say, "No, this is not. This is outrageous, uh, and you can fire me." And I know that California, they have a really good guards union, and unless they're captured too, it'd be a good lawsuit, I would think.
Well, in some of these dynamics, the guards are having inappropriate relationships with some of the prisoners. And so
Right.
their complicity creates silence because they are doing things that are not above board. And so they turn a blind eye to someone who clearly shouldn't be in that situation in the first place.
Right. Right. Okay, should we do
Yeah.
the last one?
Yeah.
What was the last one?
The
What are
lo
you working on now? And
Yeah,
where
yeah.
can people find
And
you?
perhaps we can, if you feel, I feel like there's a lot more to talk about, perhaps we could do a part 2 sometime in the near future if you're open to
That'd be
that.
great.
Okay, cool.
That'd be great.
But yeah,
Uh,
where can people find you?
so people can learn more about my work at derrickjensen.org, DERRICKJENSEN.org. I got a lot of essays up there, and books are available in libraries or bookstores. And also have a Substack. I don't know what the URL is. You can go, and it's kind of cool. I'm going to do some self promotion, which I'm not very good at. Um, that there's the free Substack is what's going on in my life and what like I'll put this interview up there
Hmm.
when you put it up, and then there's also a paid Substack, and I do something I've never seen anybody else do, which I think is kind of cool, which is people get to read my stuff as I write it.
Oh,
So
cool.
I write as I'm writing a book, I'll put up a draft. I'll put up like if I write something during the day, I'll put it up that night and you get to see first draft, second draft, third draft. And
Nice.
I've never heard of anybody else doing it. I think that would be really fun. Like if I could see that for some writer I really like
Yeah.
J.K. Rowling,
Mm.
see the
Yes.
very first draft. And
Mhm.
also, it's really cool. This is all I'm going to sell it, and then I'll stop. That like I'm working on a screenplay right now that there was a character. I brought in a character a couple days ago, and then and then she got killed off. And I didn't know that she was gonna get killed off when I first wrote her. And when you read a book, it's a surprise to you that the character dies, but the book is dead. I mean, the book is set in stone.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So no matter what you want, Old Yeller's gonna die.
Mhm.
And, Sidney Carton's gonna get his head cut off. And thank you, Derek. You've just ruined A Tale of Two Cities. And, um, but when I'm writing this stuff, I don't know what's gonna happen. So you're actually reading a living document where this character may not die, and I may change my mind and bring her back. I may, you know, cut the scene. Anyway, so that's on Substack.
Cool.
And then what I've been working on is I have 2 books that aren't published yet that are done. Actually, I have 3 books that aren't published yet that, one of them we'll talk about another time because it's a big story. Um, it's the one that destroyed my career. Um, the publisher not only disliked it, so I criticized queer theory, and because of that, the publisher not only didn't publish it, but then they severed their relationship with me. And that's what you get for criticizing queer theory. Anyway,
Yeah, we definitely
uh,
should talk about that.
yeah, I'd be happy to. And then 2 more books that I've written since then that I just haven't. One of them is at my agent and he's shopping it, and the other one I have to make some edits on. The one that is not at my agent yet is called The Boy in the Box, and it's about abuse. It starts off with the family story and then moves to a larger examination of rape culture. And I use as sort of the backbone the thing I mentioned earlier about Peggy Reeves Sanday and the markers of high and low rape cultures. So I go through the different markers and talk about how they do or don't apply to the dominant culture. So that's called The Boy in the Box. I think it's one of the best things I've written, except there's 2 chapters in the middle that I end up talking about the queer theory and the trans stuff, which both apply, but also I feel like, as you know, I wander in my books, and, this is a bit wandering off the subject for that book, and I wanna do a book just about queer theory and trans. So I need to pull those out, and I just haven't gotten around to doing it in an elegant fashion and making the transition. Anyway, and then the other book is, I took care of my mom pretty much by myself when she was dying, and a lot of people take care of of their elder parents when they die pretty much by themselves, and it's a disaster. Um, it is, there's that cliche about, it takes a village to raise a child, and it really takes a village to take care of an elder as they're dying.
Mhm.
And, uh, one of my favorite parts of that book is I do some interviews with other people who did it, and there's one woman, good friend of mine, who says that, she took care of her mom as she was dying of Alzheimer's, and she did it for many years, and her mom's been dead for a few years, and she says, I've never recovered. I I don't have anything left." She said, "I haven't been in a relationship. I haven't my career has been destroyed, everything, because I have nothing
Hmm.
because I gave everything to that." And she said, "I was glad to do it for my mom." My mom, I owed her everything because she was so important to me. She was so wonderful raising me, and of course, I'm gonna do this for someone I love. And it's the same with my mom. Of course, I'm gonna do this for her. And of course, but that doesn't alter the fact that it's been 7 years and I haven't recovered. It took something out of me, and it's not just my mom's death, that's part of it, but also, uh, it's like a good friend of mine who he's a doctor, and he created, one of the first VA, hospices for people with AIDS, for veterans with AIDS. He's been around death a lot, and his sort of joke that he tells about this is, "Do not try this at home."
Hmm.
Um, and,
I can
my mom
imagine.
wanted to die at home, and I'm so proud of myself for having she was able to die at home, and that's great. In this house, I live here now that she's dead, and I lived close by before. That's another thing, we don't take care of our elders. It's this idea. It's so interesting. In my 20s, I committed to living around her for the rest of her life, and a lot of Americans and some Europeans would go, "God, you must have separation issues." And all of my indigenous and uh, non-industrialized world friends would go, "Well, of course, one of you is gonna do it. You're
Mhm.
the lucky one." And, yeah, I had a wonderful time, living near my mom for for the last 30 years of her life, but the last 6 months was just and I knew I was gonna have to do it, but it's just it's hell. It is taking care of my mom as she was dying was the hardest thing I've ever done. Um So the book is about that, and of course, I can't stay on topic, so I talk about mortality, I talk about, is there a heaven? And if there's a heaven, do frogs get to go in? And if frogs get to go in, what about the carrot? Does it get to go in? It's like,
Mhm.
where do you draw the line on that? Because it's
Mhm.
ridiculous to just say humans get to go in.
Exactly.
But then if humans get to go in, what about bacteria? I mean, for God's sake, so I end up being about that. It ends up being, uh, about twists of fate that, um, I mean, I don't wanna do the 7 degrees of separate. So I have a friend who just died in a terrible accident, and it's like, she was alive, and then there was you make you turn left instead of right,
Mhm.
and you die. You take one step this way, you live. You take one step this way, you die. It's like it's life is just so. Uh, I don't know. So the book is about all those things too. It's everything is it's sort of meditations on mortality.
Hmm.
Um, and I think it's a good book. I like it. I like it quite a lot. Anyway, he's searching for a publisher for that right now. Oops, somebody's calling me, so that's a good note to end on.
Okay. Thank
Okay,
you so
talk to you
much,
soon.
Derek. And
Thank you.
we'll talk about when to do this part 2.
Okay,
Oh,
great.
all right.
Bye.
Farewell.
Thanks. Bye.
So, it's been a while since I've asked you this. Actually, you weren't even on the last episode of The Melt. I'm not you kind of were in and out the last handful of episodes. So,
It's true.
what did you think of this talk?
I really enjoyed Derek's stream of consciousness
Yes.
delivery. I like how he is, uh, in some ways, very academically based and focused. He has many academic references and he's got a lot of receipts, and I think that's great. It's different when someone is promoting a book because you're kind of nailing one specific topic down and it's kind of going into that 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 world that they're in. But he's such a prolific writer, and definitely a scholar of the written word, that he can grab all these different references and connect them all to the topic at hand.
Yeah, we didn't get into the queer theory stuff until the last, well, I was going to say a half hour, but excuse me, more like 45 minutes. But it was interesting nonetheless, all of the various areas that we meandered around. And it felt very organic. So that's good. Um, and I'm looking down at my notes that I took, many that didn't ever get addressed, but I see unruly penis, and you don't see that very often in an episode note. I wanted to make sure to remind him because I was sure he was going to forget, but came back to it
He
all on
brought
his own.
Yep, he brought it back. Yeah, and I thought unruly penis, and then I was like, "That's not what he said. What is the fuck? Where's my mind at?" And then when he said it, I was like, "I did get it right."
You did get it right. And for somebody who wasn't super duper excited about doing a melt episode, I thought you were super present and very astute and much more on your articulation game than I was.
It's, you know, my it's my wheelhouse. Anytime we talk about sexuality and the system that we live in and how it relates to human sexuality, I it's my third language, and also very interesting to hear his perspective on pornography and how it has really negatively affected our culture. We could have gone on that tangent for many hours as well, because I have lots of thoughts about that. And I think it's just great to have someone who understands how all of these things relate,
Mm,
that it's
yeah.
not just one thing.
Mhm.
It seems like his work, he did a lot of work on conservation and the environment and how uh, humans relate to the environment and our relationship to our environment. And I was really into that because I have my own language with the grass in our yard and the flowers that I've planted and just nature as a whole. And I can see how man has interjected into that relationship and how man influences that relationship and how beautiful it is if we just kind of take a step back and just are more observant. Um, but I just love people who are able to talk about technology and how technology is affecting us outside of just the mesmerism of technology, but how it does create this kind of this fracturing or this separateness to the lived experience.
Yeah, what he was saying about it had been a long time since he touched flesh. Plastic was much more something frequent. Um, yeah, I get that. When I'm out, usually when I'm outside walking the dogs in the morning. Uh, by walking, I mean dragging. Um, they're old. I'm just kidding. Um, I think like God, it looks like it's going to be a great day. We should definitely try to get outside. We should try and walk or something. And then I remembered we had the episode tonight about talking about experiences like that, and it wasn't a good time for that. But we really should make it a point to maybe this weekend or some evening this week to walk, take a walk,
Mhm.
yeah, or go
Yeah,
hit some trails.
I see. Well, it's so funny. Like I see now the implications and the influence of humans, and there's the fucking mosquito. That's exactly what I was about to say. How, all of the fucking chemtrailing and this massive spraying of the earth and all of the shit that's going on with that. And now this introduction of a million mosquitoes that have been dropped from a fucking airplane or ticks.
Ticks and boxes.
Like one of the things that's doing is making people fearful of going outside,
Hmm.
because if you are part of a vulnerable population, you don't necessarily wanna get a tick bite, or you don't necessarily wanna get a mosquito bite, and so, by creating these other elements that we could consider natural but are being, introduced by man, what's happening is it's forcing us to stay inside. Like, oh, no one wants to get Lyme. No one wants to get the alpha gal or whatever the fuck. Like, so what does that make you? It makes you afraid to go outside. And so then you're more on your phone or you're more in front of the television. And again, you're being separated from this thing with intent. It's not accidental that those things are happening.
True. Alpha gal. What is
Alpha
that?
gal is the Um, I wanna say enzyme, but I don't know that it's an enzyme. It's the result of getting the Texan deer tick bite that then you get alpha-gal, which is you are not able to eat meat anymore.
Oh,
You have an allergic reaction
it
to
sounds
eating
like a
meat.
superhero. Alpha gal.
Yeah, it does.
I thought I'd get a chuckle out of that at least. Anyway, I'm tired. I'm hungry. And there's gonna be a part 2, so
Yeah.
perhaps sometime in the next couple of weeks, we can schedule him to come back on, and
Yeah, he was great. I
yeah,
really, really
it
enjoyed
was
him.
sweet. Yeah, good guy, good person, and I like the way he thinks,
Mhm.
and that he thinks
Yes. Yes, yes,
critically.
yes.
Alright.
Yeah.
Thank you all so much for especially the people who have been contributing even though we haven't put out an episode in months. You are super special, and you're super appreciated for sticking in there. Not knowing, I mean, I guess I said during one of the last episodes that we would be coming back and that there would be a sabbatical, but yeah, some people dropped off and some people just stayed. And I just want to thank the people that stayed and had faith that we would return. And because just to keep the website up, to keep all of the things that the gears running, it still takes money.
Mhm.
And that has been enough to cover that, so thank you so, so much for doing that, and we've gotta maybe try and work a melt meetup sometime this
Yeah.
summer, and yes.
We also had our first bear sighting.
Oh, yeah,
That was
behind
awesome.
him. It
Yeah.
was funny the way his windows are and the way that it just looks as in a one-dimensional picture, two-dimensional picture. It looked like he was in front of a zoo display, ironically, and that there was a caged bear there just kind of fucking
Yeah,
up.
and I could see the reflection of his
Yeah,
dog in the window as well.
yeah.
It was just great.
Uh-huh.
But it was all very casual with this bear cub in the background,
Yeah,
which
it's
I
funny.
love.
Yes,
That was awesome.
I've seen something on YouTube of him turning his laptop around, and there's, like, 3 bears inside. which is crazy. I don't know if I can live with that. I'm scared of bears, but maybe I'm just not familiar with them. I don't live in a bear neighborhood, so to rub elbows with bears. Okay.
Yeah, I agree.
All right. Lovely people. Thank you so much for listening. And yeah, there's more coming up real soon. So,
Yes, stay tuned.
all right. Much love. Fairly well.
Bye.
And
Yeah.